Oh, that was not me. Good evening, everyone. It's been a while since I've yielded that gavel. I need to be careful, right? Welcome to the October 10th, 2022 meeting for the Auburn City Council. I'm Alice Dowden Calvillo, Auburn Mayor Pro Tem, sitting in for Sandy Amara, our mayor, who is not here today. As I said, I call this meeting to order, and I'll ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Spokley.
Here.
Berlant.
Here.
Riddell Harris. Here. Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
And for the record, Mayor Amara is absent.
Thank you very much. A quorum is present for the purposes of our meeting tonight. Will you please all stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God. Thank you very much. We have one proclamation on our agenda this evening. It's for breast cancer awareness, and I will ask the recipient of this to join me at the lectern. Come on over. See, I should have worn my pink dress. I am not, but I have a pink cup. So, all right. Well, whereas breast cancer touches the lives of Americans from every background and in every community, considerable progress has been made in the fight against breast cancer. And it is estimated that more than 287,850 new cases of invasive breast cancer in women will be diagnosed in the United States in 2022. And October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, an annual campaign to increase awareness about the disease. And during this time, it is fitting to advocate for breast cancer research and to educate about breast cancer detection, risk factors, and treatment. And we support those courageously fighting breast cancer and honor the lives lost to the disease. And this October, we recognize breast cancer survivors, those battling the disease, their families who are a source of love and encouragement, and applaud the efforts of medical professionals and researchers working hard to find a cure. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that I, Alice Dowden Calvillo, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Auburn, on behalf of the City Council, hereby proclaim October 2022 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month and urge citizens and civic organizations to acquaint themselves with the issues involved in breast cancer awareness. Thank you very much. Thank you. Would you like to say a word? Sure.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your agenda to do this for us tonight. I am a 13-year breast cancer survivor and a member of the Placer Breast Cancer Foundation, and we're doing great things. Our goal is to find a cure. We just had the Placer Pink, Hot Pink Fun Run, and we have a full month of events this month. So watch for them and come and support us, and we so much appreciate everything you guys have done. Thank you.
And thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Proclamation.
Thanks.
You want to take a picture of us here?
Okay. You want to be in it? No? Okay.
Here.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Also under Mayor's acknowledgements, I wanted just to make a couple of comments. And first of all, I wasn't sure if my colleagues were aware of this, but we actually had one firefighter that was up fighting the mosquito fire. And that was our battalion chief, Rob Zaccia. And he was actually out there on the front lines fighting the fire. So I wanted to give him acknowledgement and to thank him for his service on the mosquito fire. And to, I didn't know that. He mentioned that to me the other day, so I thought it was important to acknowledge that. I also wanted to acknowledge that the Auburn Fire Department had a very successful open house on Sunday. It was a lot of fun. Councilman Berlant was there along with his son, who had a great time. And I think that pretty much everyone had a really good time. It was a good opportunity for the community to come out. Were you there? Did you come as well?
No, I had a kid's birthday party.
Oh, birthday parties. I didn't stay for the whole time, so I didn't want to say that you weren't there if you were there. So, but it was a great opportunity to introduce the firehouse to the community and have kids learn about the importance of planning your escape because fire won't wait. We also had the Auburn Police Department's Faith in Blue event on Sunday. So it was a very busy weekend. And it was well attended by members of our faith community. And it was really the efforts, it's the first of an annual event for the purposes of gathering folks from the faith community to open the doors of communication with our police departments and trying to establish good relationships now and address any concerns and how the two communities can help each other as we move forward. So those were just a couple of events this weekend. I'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is the agenda approval. Are there any changes to the agenda, council? Hearing none. Are there any changes or requests from the community? Hearing none. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Yeah, I'll move that we approve the agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Spokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo.
Aye. Let the record show the agenda has been approved as presented to us. Next item on the agenda is our consent calendar. We have just two items on the agenda under consent. I'll ask our city manager if you'd like to give just a brief synopsis of those two items.
Yes, Council. There are two items. First is a recommendation from the Economic Development Commission for $1,500 funding to support the business community for advertisement on the city billboard on Highway 80. And then the second item is amendment to the restated joint powers agreement for Pioneer Energy. This is to allow the addition of two more members. One is Grass Valley and the other is Nevada City. As this came down, oh, what a difference a year makes. Last year, as El Dorado County and Placerville were coming in, there was a lot of discussion, but obviously the success of Pioneer Energy has got other cities wanting to come in. So this is basically just a resolution approving the amendment to allow those entities in. And that is the consent calendar.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or concerns on the consent agenda, council?
I wanted to pull item one. Sorry.
Okay. Well,
You know how much I hate pulling things off consent,
we don't
so
have-
I know.
the one item.
Sorry.
I'd like to ask the public if there's any request to pull any items. No request to pull item 2. All right, council, can I have a motion to adopt item number 2, please?
I'll move to approve the consent calendar minus item 1.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo.
Aye. The record show that the consent calendar minus item 1 has been adopted. We'll now move on to number 1. Councilmember Riddell Harris, did you have questions on this item?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight that there's still some confusion on this issue having to do with a contract between us and the chamber, and we have the land and they have the billboard and we're paying them to advertise businesses that are part of the chain. I don't know. It's just very confusing for this whole thing. And we did vote in the Economic Development Commission to go ahead and purchase this space, but I just wanted to make sure that it was very clear that we need to sort that out before we have this happen again, because there's a lot of controversy around how this is all working and that it hasn't really been sorted out. So can we have a game plan to have this sorted out in the next 6 months, year, something like that? So we just don't have this it was last year, there was an issue around it. It never got sorted out. And now there's an issue again. I just want to make sure it gets sorted at some point.
Thank you, Councilmember Riddell Harris. We've been next to Jonathan Wright, Community Development and Economic Development Director. We've been working with the city attorney, and actually he's given me a licensing agreement that I have not had a chance to review. We have it on the tentative agenda to move forward, so I'm hoping before the end of the year.
Perfect.
That's not better.
Yep. That's all I wanted to make sure we were doing. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Is there any public comment on this item? Yes. Yes, on this item, on item number 1.
She's general public. comment.
Oh, general comment. Okay. All right. Seeing no public comment, can I please have a motion to adopt item 1?
I'll motion to adopt item 1.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Verlander. Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo.
Aye. The record show the motion has been adopted unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda, we have a couple items under public hearing. We have the first ordinance amending chapter 159 of title 14 of the, I probably read that wrong, of the Auburn Municipal Code regulating AUDs and junior dwelling units. And
Public comment.
oh, public comment. Well, see, I'm just trying to race so quickly because
You're
you know,
doing
that's
great.
the way it is.
You're
So
great.
I'd like to squash that. The next item on the agenda is public comment. This is an item for any member of the public to address the council on a matter that has not been scheduled for action tonight. We can't take action on said items, but we can refer them to staff for future consideration on another agenda. And we do have someone here for public comment, so please state your name. And sorry about that when you were just told me that you were here for public comment.
All right. Hang on just a second. All right. Good evening, City Council. My name is Sue Engel, and I've lived in Placer County for 38 years, and I just recently retired as a waste management specialist. And I applaud the city for their forward thinking in improving the uptown and the downtown areas. But I would recommend that in this process, you would be making an ADA accessible plan for disabled residents and parents with strollers that need to use sidewalks. Curb ramps providing access to streets and sidewalks are a basic city service, yet there are very few curb ramps in Old Town and Uptown. I'm asking the City Council to please direct Public Works to focus on the sidewalks on High Street and Orange Street in front of the high school. First, High Street. Currently, there's no way to get on or off the sidewalks on High Street from the clock tower to the Folsom, to Auburn Folsom. Your most vulnerable population, your disabled, elderly, and infants are in the middle of the street competing with cars. The absolute worst intersection is at High Street and College Way, as there are 4 curbs with no off ramps. This means for 2 blocks, I'm in the middle of High Street. And it's extremely dangerous around the Unity Church. You barely get 2 cars around it, let alone a wheelchair and 2 cars in the street. So it's very dangerous and it's really scary, you guys. I know personally. So secondly, I would like to address why Placer High School built a building and installed new sidewalks on Orange Street that are not ADA accessible. Why? It's baffling. We're in the year 2022, and this is the excuse I got from the schools is that 1, there was no ADA access before they started building the new building. 2, the city of Auburn approved the plan, and 3, the state architect designed it. So they have punted it basically to the city. What I'm asking you is, again, I'm in the middle of the street, all the way down Orange Street in front of the high school. I would just like to use the sidewalk. I'm not asking to point blame at anyone. I just want it fixed. So 15 years ago, I responded to the city council's outreach for the pedestrian master plan with council members Keith Nesbitt and Kevin Hanley. We spent numerous hours walking up and down all the streets in Auburn, identifying where walking was, there were impediments. 15 years later, there's really nothing has happened except Nevada Street. So I would like the city council to appoint a task force to work on this issue. And I would like to volunteer to be part of that task force because it's worth my while to be able to have safe sidewalks. So it's time to make Auburn walkable for all. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate that. We can't take any action, as I mentioned tonight, but we do appreciate that. And we can certainly direct staff to provide a presentation on our compliance with ADA. I know that we do have a schedule for those kinds of things. So we'll ask staff to bring a report to us. We can go from there.
Well, maybe the city manager can at least give an update. If I'm not mistaken, High Street is on the on the schedule at the clock tower intersection that was referenced to get ADA ramps. Is that correct?
So in the downtown, absolutely. It's programmed for this year, but she was mentioning some other locations. Maybe we'll come back with an update of where our overall accessibility plan is for the main intersections in the downtown area along High Street. Those are programmed for this year, but let me bring back a little bit more of a global approach.
Can you also look at the Placer County, I mean, not Placer High School? I know that there were some issues where we didn't, at least we didn't know about some of the things that were going on with the design for Placer High School. I just want to make sure that we signed off on that and that our permitting department, I don't know if I know there's a state architect has certain allowances and we have certain, and I'm not sure who's on first when it comes to ADA compliance, when it comes to the high school. Cause I know we only have so much control.
Yeah, just so you know, the city has absolutely no jurisdiction over the school.
Okay, so we couldn't have stopped them if we wanted to?
Let's find out where they were at. The school district's property is their property, and it actually they have very special dispensations regarding how things are reviewed on there. But let me follow up on the street sections if we had anything to do with those, and we'll come back.
I just know our permitting department is pretty diligent about making sure that new buildings and stuff have ADA compliance. So I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss something. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any additional public comment? Any comments from my colleagues? All right, hearing none. We'll move on to the next item, which is now the first of two public hearings. John, I'm going to go ahead and defer to you or to Tanya.
Yeah,
Right.
Mayor and Council, tonight you're going to have two public hearings dealing with both ADUs and junior ADUs and also density bonus. Both of these are kind of offshoots of some of the things that the state has been mandating. Tonight, why don't we have Senior Planner Tanya Ward come up, and both of these items have been through a workshop and then recommendation from the Planning Commission. And I think Tanya will cover that.
Great. Thank you, John. Good evening, Vice Mayor Downing Cavio, council members, Tanya Ward, Senior Planner for the Community Economic Development Department. As John mentioned, for your consideration is a recommendation of an ordinance intended to adopt, repeal and replace the current code as the city has it in order to comply with current state regulation for accessory dwelling units. As mentioned, the Planning Commission held a study session on August 16th and a public hearing on September 20th, in which they provided for your consideration the attached resolution approving as provided by staff and without any changes. Upon putting the packet together tonight, staff identified that it was quite voluminous and there was a lot of information included from these staff packets. And so as we move forward in a second reading and other future actions, staff will be taking out that extraneous information to keep our packets a little bit more reasonable in size. So as far as accessory dwelling units, or what they're commonly known as ADUs, they've been a means for cities and counties to increase housing production. And with the more recent legislation passed, its focus has been on streamlining the local review process in order to reduce potential barriers, and all of which has been incorporated within this draft ordinance tonight for your consideration. As a quick recap on how ADUs have been defined, these are considered independent living units allowed where residential uses are permitted throughout the city, and that they provide living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation provisions. These units can be part of the interior of an existing single-family home or a proposed remodel. They can be part of attached or detached, and they can also be part of a conversion of an accessory structure. The staff report goes into greater detail regarding all of these differences and the development standards associated with each. Under the recent state laws that staff has mentioned, a residential site may have a primary dwelling unit, can have an accessory dwelling unit, as mentioned, and it can also have a junior accessory dwelling unit, or what is known for short as a JADU. The JADU is considered part of the ADU family, but it has some distinctions from the ADUs. It has to be a unit that's completely contained entirely within the primary unit. It's limited to 500 square feet in size. It needs to have either an efficiency kitchen or sanitation shared with the primary residence, or it can be provided separately. In addition to that, the junior ADU has an owner occupancy restriction. It's important to note that the state has identified certain ADU types as state exempt ADUs, and this list and all of their standards have been provided in your staff report for quick reference. But it's important to note that these are exempt from all other local and state regulations, with the exception of the building code. And in these certain instances, a building permit must be issued when the applicable standards can be demonstrated by the applicant. Repealing and replacing the existing ordinance that complies with state law, it accomplishes several goals for the city. It complies with the city's general plan. It implements the adopted housing element implementation measures. It aligns with the city's intent to provide affordable housing options, and it adheres to the city's strategic plan priority by updating planning documents. The draft ordinance is found to be exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act. It implements the provisions of the government code, and moreover, it makes the city compliant with state law. Next steps will include submitting the ordinance to the State Housing and Community Development Department for their review and approval for the compliance with our adopted housing element, and staff will return to council for a second reading. This concludes staff's report, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'd like to open it up for questions from my colleagues. Are there questions from colleagues? Yes, Mr. Spokely.
Yes, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Tanya, thank you very much for your report. Appreciate that. I've got the same comment I had before when this law first came down from the state. We are in a very high risk fire danger area. It's not the right term, but there we go. Thank you, Daniel. Yet we're allowed to build these things 4 foot off property lines, both rear and side yards, which means that we could have 8 feet from structure to structure. Has there been any conversations at the state level, local level, fire, organizations related to this being allowed in our high fire risk area?
A good question. So in regards to the setbacks have been evenly distributed across all the cities in regarding to the compliance with the building code. Building code is regulating those provisions with safety in mind. So in other jurisdictions where there's high fire severity zones, this has not come up as far as I know. Maybe the city attorney may have some input, but it's more likely to come up in those instances where structures exceed 2 stories in height. And those have been, I think, more of a discussion item than the single story. And as according to our ordinance as it's written, they are limited, to a height limit of 1 story and 16 feet if they're new. And if it's a conversion, then it would also require to meet building code. So that could be an existing accessory structure that would be converted, and those are considered a state exempt ADU if they comply with building code.
Okay, so no real conversation is yet being had at state or local levels related to this concern for a community like ours?
Not currently, not for 1 story. I have seen some discussions for those structures greater than 1 story.
Got it.
But not
Okay.
in this specific instance.
The other question is kind of related to some of our aging infrastructure. If I'm understanding the state law and state requirements that they're passing down to our local jurisdiction, they're saying that we have to allow sewer connections for an ADU as well as a junior ADU. Is there any opportunity for the city to require inspections similar to what Colfax does whenever they transfer ownership of a parcel? They require the sewer services to be inspected. If there's an existing issue with the sewer line, we can have people building 2 units and connecting bathrooms and laundry and all of the kitchen facilities to some of our aging infrastructure, whether it's private or public. Is there anything the city can do to protect themselves from running into issues down the road with multiple EDUs being built and having sewer flow issues?
Well, in regards to that, the state has made it very clear that every property has the potential of having essentially 3 units. I don't think that there's been a conversation of how every jurisdiction has a capacity that's met. But in regards to building permits, when an applicant does submit an application for construction, they would need to show connection. The inspection of that line can also be considered at the time. That may be a question more directly to the building department and public works. And I think I see the city manager has something to add.
So we're talking about ADUs, which are a separate structure, and we're also talking about junior ADUs, which is attached. In the case of the attached structure, they can go into the same lateral.
Mhm.
If it's a detached structure, we can require them to have a separate lateral that would go into the main. So that would be the differentiation. The reality is that the detached ADU can be up to 1,200 square feet, basically the
small
size
house.
of well, it is a small home. But the way that it works, the detached, you can have a separate lateral, which obviously would go into the main. To your question, as far as the overall size of infrastructure, so much of this is predicated under the idea that the main infrastructure has the standards and the capacity to take the additional laterals coming into it. And that would be the question. Is your main infrastructure satisfactory?
Okay, thank you, John. Appreciate that. I've got comments, but I'll.
Okay. Mr.
up.
Berland?
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. My question kind of connects to the first question Councilmember Spokley asked, and that's related to the fire hazard severity zones. And this may be more for you, Gary, but Tanya, if you have the answer, please chime in. I know that, there were a number of bills in the last couple of years related to development, and several of them that I'm aware of, specifically actually provided exemptions within the very high fire hazard severity zone. An exemption that wasn't necessarily a blanket, but there was some language about making sure that local governments were still prudent in their responsibility to increase density, but ensuring that fire hazard severity zones take into account. I understand completely the fact that was mentioned that the building code, Title 24, still applies, but what I heard was that's it. And I'm curious, specifically related to, not to throw out a bunch of numbers at you, Gary, but Assembly Bill 2911 was passed in 2017. The chief specifically brought to us, and this city council sent a letter to the Board of Forestry and Fire Protection during their rulemaking of the fire safe minimum regulations. Those are the development standards leading up to a development in the very high fire hazard severity zone. And by the word development, I mean any construction, not a subdivision. So I'm curious if Title 24 is the only thing that is not waived. Well, let me ask you this question. Is Title 24 the only thing that's waived, or are those standards still applicable?
You're talking about the standards that are in that bill and that are being developed by regulation right
Yeah,
now.
they're already through they're going through the regulatory process now, but it's the fire hazards, it's the the fire safe minimum regulations, which dictates road widths, water supply, and a number of other components related to fire.
I need to confirm that. And if you give me a moment, I think I can do
Yeah, and it may not be an answer today, but it might be one for us to discuss in the second reading, if not, because the point here is, at least from my perspective, and to get into a little commentary that may be the same flavor, I'm all about making sure that we have adequate housing, especially affordable housing in our community, and this does it. But it makes zero sense to pack our canyon full of people who then get trapped because our gold rush era roads, while some of them repaved, thank you, Menjel, cannot take the capacity of that number of people. And so I'm not really worried about some of the other things like parking and sewer connections that have some valid concerns and issues, but I specifically don't want us to just pack the canyon with ADUs and JADUs only to have those people not be able to evacuate safely. And so I think we should do our due diligence to ensure that there are not some reasonable modifications to the state requirements when passing the ADU updated code. And I would assume, knowing from professional day job, that HCD is working through this as well. And so I'd be curious if they have any insight as we submit this ordinance to them, what input they might have in how we balance that. And spoiler alert, I think I know the answer, which is they don't know yet.
Yeah, one additional thought, the triennial update of the building code will be coming before the council soon, maybe at the next meeting or the one after, so it's in place by January 1. And as you know, for other provisions of the building code, this council has adopted local amendments based on climate or geography, and that opportunity is still there. So something to consider in this context.
But just to remind you, Title 24 of the building code is only for construction of the home itself. It does not dictate the development standards leading to the home. Those are in Title 14, which is the Natural Resources California Code of Regulations, which then are now applicable under AB 2911 into local jurisdictions that have very high fire hazard severity zones. So I believe the updated Title 24 points back to the Title 14 regulations, and there's a pointer. But I just want to ensure that we are ensuring roadway widths and some of those other egress items are addressed as we increase densification. So I guess from my perspective tonight, and that kind of concludes my questions, we may not have the answers. And again, I believe nobody per se has the answers. But Gary, I would be surprised if your other cities aren't dealing with some of these same struggles. And again, just for the record for everyone, I'm not trying to get out of ADUs or JADUs. And I think there's some very valid other concerns related to the proximity that we're putting the setback lack of requirements and some of those other things. I want to see people be able to build more, but we just cannot trap people in our canyon. So that concludes my questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right, thank you very much.
I actually do
Yes,
have,
please.
Matt made me think of a quick question. Not sure if that's probably for planning, maybe for John. When it comes to fees, having to do with infrastructure, I know in the electric sector, when someone's adding in something that's going to contribute to additional capacity that's going to be needed, we don't necessarily want the last person to have to pay the full cost. So are we making people pay their fair share when they connect into our infrastructure and charging a fee with each additional one? So that way, eventually we can afford that upgrade of our infrastructure rather than having the last person on the line or the last person to add be on the hook for the whole thing?
So yes, impact fees generally still apply to ADUs as
Okay.
well as connection fees, but there are some exceptions. So the legislature said no impact fees if it's 750 square feet or less. So for the smaller ADUs, city can't charge them anymore. And impact fees for all the other ADUs have to be based on square footage or number of fixtures that are in the ADU. And so that actually requires some of the cities' impact fees are already calculated in that manner. And so that's all right to use, and some are not. So because the state has limited when and under what circumstances and how those impact fees are calculated, not all are charged, but the ones that can be are.
When we come back for the second reading, can you bring something back on impact fees, just so that way we get a sense of where they kind of, what ADU and non-ADU impact fees are?
Yeah, so we're talking about like parks, the impact fee for parks, for example, and parking and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
Okay.
So would road, sewer, storm drain, all that stuff, we charge for all that stuff, right?
Yeah, well, sewer and storm drain, those would be connection charges.
Okay.
And so,
But we have
yes,
a
those are
fee
charged.
on that goes not just to the connection, but also to the larger overall upgrade of the infrastructure that's gonna have to be done later.
So yes, a connection fee is the proportional impact on the system by the new connection. And that includes the facilities and piping and everything else that goes into it.
Only if it's more than 750 square feet.
Correct.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
if we have a bunch of little ones, then
Right.
we have a
So-
problem.
So the appreciation is that there's a sliding scale.
Okay.
Just so you know, anything below 500 has no impact fees. Not for schools, not for really anything. It's 500 feet and below, you don't pay anything. Up to 750 square feet, there will be some level of impact fees. But
But-
we'll bring that back for a little edification because it's based on there's a sliding scale on all this stuff. And to answer the most important question, no, it's not going to cover the impacts on streets and all those things for any of that. It simply won't.
Go ahead. You look like you want to say
Mr.
more.
Thank
Stokely,
you.
did you have, yeah, Mr.
So,
Stokely?
so that can include a kitchen, washing, drying facilities, bathrooms, all of that stuff. As long as we're below 750 square feet, we can't assess any additional fees for sewer impact fees, any roadway fees, which we don't have here.
Yeah.
Any of that stuff wouldn't apply because it's below 750 square feet.
Yeah, correct.
Thank you. Any further questions by council? Here,
Sorry,
yes, Mr.
Madam
Stokely.
Vice Mayor. Just maybe a question for Gary and John. If the city wanted to implement some sort of inspection services on the laterals to ensure that they're adequate for additional units, is that something that we could add or amend in this ordinance to deal with?
Yes, through the building code provision, yes, because it needs to comply with that. There's an inspection, there's going to be a certificate of occupancy, so there will necessarily be a sign off on the permit that's issued. That could be included within the scope of that, yes.
And that's forthcoming. You said maybe our next meeting, did you say that we were expecting the amendments to the building?
Well, that occurs now,
Oh.
right? So they'll have to pull a building permit for this and comply with the building code. That requirement is carried over in this ordinance. So as part of that, there will be an inspection at the end to sign off on that. And that inspection can include all the other requirements under the building code, such as capacity and installation, and is it up to code? So that inspection component could be added to that process.
Thank you.
But there's the broader, there's the pre-sale inspection, which is kind of a different cat on things. In this case, when the ADU connects into the sewer line, absolutely, we inspect that, make sure that it works. But there's the broader pre-sale inspection that doesn't necessarily accrue to this.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to open this up for public comment. All right, is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none, I'm going to bring this back. And, I just have to make the statement that this is just another opportunity for the state to chip away at local control. And it's very frustrating. I certainly support ADUs and the junior ADUs, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to provide additional affordable housing. But what I don't appreciate is just the fact that we are totally being dictated as to how we make these kinds of decisions now. We don't, it's not even a decision anymore. It's just, this is how it shall be, and you'll follow the same rules. And jurisdictions all have their own issues. And just as Councilman Barlett was talking about fire issues and so forth, it's difficult for us to even to address those kinds of things. And the state doesn't even know what they're doing right now. So again, just another opportunity to take that control away from us. And it's very frustrating. So any other comments? I know Mr. Spokely, you said you had a comment.
Yes, thank you again, Madam Vice Mayor. The fire thing is a huge concern. My fellow council member Berlant, is much more adept at talking about the requirements and issues associated with that, but it's plain to see if I can't put a, pad for pool equipment within 5 feet of my property line, why in the world can I put an entire unit within 4 feet of my property line? So I still have a strong issue with that. I agree with Madam Vice Mayor in that, having the state tell us what we can and can't do just feels wrong to me. I am all for ADUs, junior ADUs. I think it's a great way for us to get some more affordable housing in our communities. So, I'm not against that. I think it needs to be more specific to the area that we're in. And we've got real fire issues, fire concerns. We spend most of our time on this council talking about fire issues and fire concerns. So the fact that the state's just telling us this is what we're going to do really is wrong, in my opinion. On the aging infrastructure and the connections, we on this council need to be careful with this because there are a lot of developers out there that are doing brand new projects that are single family residential projects, and they're planning ADUs on every one after they build the units, after they get occupancy. They're planning on putting ADUs on every single one of them and putting junior ADUs in every garage. That's 3 families that potentially are going to live in a unit that's designed for a single family. So streets, access, parking, all of those things. You drive through some of our areas here in downtown and there's cars parked everywhere. Imagine if each of those units had an ADU in the back and a junior ADU in the garage. That's a huge concern. That's something that we, I think, as a city need to figure out how to deal with. So, Madam Mayor,
And,
that's all
and
my
our
comment.
control is very limited. So we have impact without the ability to really mitigate, really is what it turns down. All right. If there is no further comment or discussion, do I have a motion? Excuse me. Yes, Mr. Bell.
Yeah, just one clarification for the council. In the agenda packet, the ordinance appeared a couple times. So I wanted to make sure that the council, one, to ask the clerk and also the senior planner if there were any differences between those versions so that the council is all aware of which version they're voting on before doing so. For example, there is a version that begins on page 164 of your overall agenda packet and page 142 of the materials for this item. That appears to be the ordinance for consideration this evening, but I just wanted to confirm that and draw the council's attention to that page number so you're aware of what you're voting on.
They are the same ordinances. There were no changes recommended by the Planning Commission at either the study session or public hearing. So it has carried over from the beginning to now without change.
So note, yeah, because I did note that as well. There were several versions, but they're all the same. Okay.
All the same.
Okay.
All right, good. Thank you
Great.
very much for bringing that clarification. Okay, I'm going to bring this item back to the council and ask for action, please.
All right, well, after that, great discussion and seeing as there's no choice, I will absolutely make a motion that we introduce and hold the first reading by title only, an ordinance repealing and replacing sections of chapter 159 of the Auburn Municipal Code regulating accessory dwelling units and junior dwelling units and all the other components of the ordinance that are listed in the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Spokely,
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo.
Aye. And let the record show the motion has been adopted unanimously. All right, the
Madam
second,
Mayor, before we move on though, I
Yes.
just want to make sure that the direction is clear from staff to come back to us before the second reading related to some of the questions on the fire hazard severity development standards and the regulations.
Yes.
Thank you.
all right, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to the next public hearing item. Ordinance amending chapter 159 of the Auburn Municipal Code regulating residential density bonus.
Good evening, Vice Mayor Dowden Cavillo, Tanya Ward, Senior Planner, Community Economic Development Department. Again, for your consideration, this is a request to adopt an ordinance that will repeal and replace the city's current residential density bonus regulations to comply with recent state legislation. The Planning Commission reviewed this drafted ordinance at a study session on August 16th and on a public hearing held on September 20th and approved it in its current form without changes in the attached resolution. And all versions of the ordinance on all 3 packets are the same as like before. The density bonus law is another tool that is historically used to provide affordable housing. It can be applied to housing development that has at least 5 or more residential units. This law allows an applicant to seek a density bonus for an increased density of housing over the maximum allowable in exchange for certain things. It can provide a number of new units and housing types at very low or moderate income households and for a period of not less than 55 years. The amount of density increase to which an applicant is entitled to, it varies according to the percentage of affordable units in an income category and the housing type. Eligibility of the density bonus percentages are identified in the attached ordinance by table. And the number of types of concessions, incentives, waivers that a city can offer are dependent upon the request. Consider these economic incentives, those that can negotiate flexible development standards in exchange for affordable housing units. These housing units can be applied for seniors, students, transitional foster youth, homeless and disabled veterans. Additionally, the application process is now streamlined and that adopts administrative procedures and timelines for processing and notification. Repealing and replacing the city's existing ordinance complies with state law. It accomplishes a lot of similar goals as we've talked about earlier tonight. It complies with our general plan. It implements our adopted 2021 housing element program measures. It aligns with the city's intent to provide a variety of affordable options to folks. It adheres to the city's strategic plan in that it provides a priority in modernizing our planning documents. The draft ordinance has been found consistent with CEQA, the California Environmental Equality Act, and moreover, it makes the city compliant with state law. If approved tonight, staff will return to the city council for a second reading. And this concludes staff report. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open this up for council questions. Questions, colleagues? I do have just a couple things. I noted in here that in the case of 100% of affordable projects, actually, there's unlimited density with, let's see here, hold on. So this is on page 237 of the staff report, and it talks about the density bonuses for projects that have 5% very low or 10% low or what have you. But they talk about in the case of 100% affordable projects that are within a half mile of a high quality transit stop. High quality transit stop, that's any bus stop, right? That's just any, doesn't have to be multimodal.
I believe the state has defined that. I just need to take a look. But I do believe it includes the transit stops, but there is a definition specifically. And I believe those provisions are part of the assembly bills that were passed in 2020 and 2021. Specifically, I think it was AB 2345 and SB 728. So if you give me just a moment, I can take a look at that specific definition.
You know, that definition of a high quality transit stop, but at the end of the day, really, then there are projects that can increase their density by 100% if they are affordable and they are within that half mile, which is pretty much everywhere in the city of Auburn, if it pertains to.
Yes, as part of this review, staff had the help of Public Works and identifying what it meant to be half mile from a transit stop or high quality transit stop or multimodal. And it pretty much includes all of the city with the exception of the southern border of our city. So Indian Hill Road and towards the southern part, it really encompasses all of the city, a half mile stop.
Any other questions, colleagues? All right.
Ju-
Mr. Spokely.
Just to add on, I
I have one.
think, Madam Mayor, the Vice Mayor, the bill also allows for heights to go to 3 stories.
That's correct.
It's awesome.
They get 80% extra density if they are all affordable and 3 stories high.
Well, I'll ask the logical next question. Is there anything that the city of Auburn can do based on what we talked about at the last item, being the very high fire severity zone that we have for the entirety of our city? Is there anything we can do to preclude some of this stuff and 3-story buildings being built within our city limits?
I do not know of any provision that would preclude at this time.
I don't think we have to require 3 stories. I don't think we automatically have to allow the 3 stories. I think but if they are 3 stories and they are affordable, they get to increase their density. So without
But if
any
they come
consideration.
before us with a 3-story building, we can't preclude them from developing a 3-story building.
Yeah, they might get to 3 stories if that's needed to build at the density that's allowed under the density bonus. So if they're proposing a level of affordability that gives them X number of units and the only way to put in those additional units is to build up into that 3rd story, then yes, they would be entitled to a 3rd story.
And this can be done in any city, any current city zone.
Yes, where that density.
R1, R2, R3.
Yeah, for the R1, R2, R3, or in any of the other zones where residential is allowed. Yes.
So basically you could have a neighborhood with an empty spot in the middle of it and someone could build a 3-story
Well,
apartment complex.
Yeah, so
potentially?
you have to look at the underlying density for the parcel though to start with, and then what the affordable level is there, and then you go from the density up. So you have density in your general plan and then also in your zoning code. So you couldn't go to 50 in a single family because you start off with a density of 1 for a single family, right?
Okay.
In that home. So yes, you can go into denser in those areas, but you're still limited by what the city otherwise grants for that zone.
Any further questions, colleagues? All right, we'll open this item up for the public. Is there any public comment on this item? Hearing none. And again, I just need to make the statement. This is again, another opportunity for the state to take away our local control. I'm not against density bonuses per se, but I just really feel that this remains in our jurisdiction, and I resent that we continue to lose our decision-making abilities. So with that, given that, did you have a comment or did you
Yeah,
want to take?
if you don't mind, before we make a motion on this staff report as well, Tanya, I would ask that we do some cleanup. It's a lot of stuff. That was 400 pages between these two documents, and most of it was irrelevant. And so if we could clean this one up as well for the second reading, that would be appreciated.
Staff noted. Thank you very much.
I was also just hoping that for my comment, when it comes back next time, I'd like to get some information on how frequently we think we're gonna see this. How often do we have people coming in and talking to us about density bonuses? Or, I mean, we're worried about it, but I just don't know how frequently we actually have developers come into the city limits and ask us about these kinds of things, and how much of a urgent concern it is right now versus, because I am concerned about not having enough affordable housing. I think that's very important. We're not seeing any of these kinds of projects. I know it's being pushed on us, which isn't great, but we also need to make sure we're having affordable housing in the area. So both of these things are around affordable housing. I'd like to know, yes, we're not exactly in favor of how it's being done this way, but I also want to know what we're doing to actually get the affordable housing to make it so we don't need, if we're not doing our job, then the state comes in and makes more requirements. So we need to show that we're doing our job and getting some affordable housing in.
The staff can speak to that. I have been the senior planner for approximately 5 years. I have not processed a density bonus application. There's been requests. They come up with some other state laws with SB 35 and some other legislation. That's been primarily the driver. And so looking at historically, the last time this ordinance was updated was in 2008, and it was in reference to the housing element adopted in 2004 and a big pack of bills that had been passed in 2005. So this is kind of a rare occurrence. It's just a tool in the toolbox that we can provide, but has it been used often? Not really, not to this.
But once we have this, now that these laws are in effect, we may actually see more, we have a resolution, or we have an ordinance and so forth. So we may see an increase there. So.
And maybe it's just a question of, we need to make it more inviting to have these in the places we want them. So that way they don't end up in the places we don't. So maybe we can work on making sure we're doing that.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to let that comment fall, because I think that's a great one, is figuring out, are there local incentives we can add to this bonus density that might help incentivize, growth in the correct areas. I mean, I understand at Bill 9, right? There's no more single family, neighborhoods. And so making sure that we're putting these in a smart location, or at least incentivizing them to go there. I think that's a wonderful idea.
And I think, again, the word really is incentivizing, because we're not going to be able to control that or mandate it. So it's
you can
being
definitely
clear.
make
Being
development more inviting in certain areas than others.
Incentivizing is key. Absolutely.
Yeah. Currently in the budget and in the overall roadmap for planning, we've got the form-based code that we're working on, which will allow vertical development in the places that it would be good in the downtown and the core. Going 3 stories in the core area.
Infill projects. And
Infill. The good thing about Auburn, we're a big hill, and worrying about a 3-story building within the core area just isn't there. Matter of fact, it would be really good to go vertical and that to create the incentives for all that. So we've got that. We've also got an updated zoning code, which will be absolutely critical, that when the council gets to the talking about an enhanced zoning code, you will absolutely be talking about densities and allowing flexibility for that to happen. The overall land use plan for the city will also address that. One little aside, in order to get to the density bonuses on affordability, the reality is that affordable housing is what I like to call a layer cake of funding that gets there. And a lot of this legislation that the state's kind of forcing on cities is really a more urban type of thing. You're talking about the idea of going for hundreds of units in some type of a project. The only way that you get the funding in a jurisdiction our size is you have to score points. And the state actually works against itself. The higher the density means that you would actually score lower in the points to get some of the state funding through HCD. So the good news is, well, the bad news is state HCD is forcing this step on us. The good news is that they haven't completely gotten them their things aligned as far as how they fund and or score and fund a lot of these projects. So there is still a
They
work
have
in
homework
progress.
to do too, I guess.
They do.
I'm a big fan of borrowing other people's good ideas. So could we go to the other cities and see what they're doing in the way of incentivizing the development where they want and borrow their ideas? That way we don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
That would be good.
Well, Madam Vice Mayor, since we're mandated to do this, I will be happy tonight to make a motion that we
Wait.
introduce.
I wanted to make sure we didn't have any further public comment. Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, since we were mandated to do this, I would like to once again make a motion that we introduce and hold a first reading by title only. An ordinance repealing and replacing sections of chapter 159 of the Auburn Municipal Code regulating residential density bonuses and the CEQA requirements that go with it as stated in the agenda packet.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Spokely,
Yes.
Berlant,
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
And Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo.
Aye. Let the record show the motion has been adopted unanimously. As we move to our next item, item number 6. Under council business, our annual report from mosquito vector, the Placer Mosquito and Vector Control District. Welcome. I know we've had to defer this a couple of times. Good to
We
see you.
did. I was actually out on maternity leave, but I'm back.
Oh, well,
So
congratulations.
thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'm a little bummed that Mayor Mara isn't here because, as you know, she sits on our board of trustees, and we really appreciate her dedication to our district and her guidance on helping our district run and keeping our operations moving forward. So I'm going to jump right in. Just starting with our district mission. Our district mission is to effectively and efficiently manage the risk from vectors and vector-borne diseases in order to protect public health and quality of life in Placer County. Just a little reminder about what we do over here at the Mosquito District. The next slide is going to show you a map of our service area. So from West Placer all the way up to Lake Tahoe. Specifically in Auburn, our activity we see here with vectors and vector-borne diseases is really limited to mosquitoes, ticks, and Lyme disease. We don't see as much West Nile virus in this area. We do see a lot of tick activity. And then again, we do see some Lyme disease. Like I mentioned a little bit about who we are an independent non-enterprise special district. We're governed by California mosquito and vector control law. We have a 7-member board of trustees represented by all the different cities in the town of Loomis that make up our service area. And then we have 24 full-time staff members, and we also hire seasonal employees that keep our operations running. What we do specifically, this is Sarah. She's working in our lab on some tick identification in this photo, but we monitor and manage vectors and diseases, like I mentioned, mosquitoes, ticks, West Nile virus, Lyme disease, and then we also assist the California Department of Public Health with rodents, and we also manage yellow jackets up in the Tahoe Basin area. We communicate the risk. That's kind of what I do as the public information officer, getting out there in the community, doing a lot of our digital media. We use integrated vector management tools, and then we also make treatment decisions based on sound science. So within those 4 buckets, we have all of our activities. So chemical control, biological control, which our mosquito fish program is pretty popular here in Auburn, and other programs that we have at our district. So I'm going to talk a little bit about West Nile virus this season. We are, as of this week, still seeing West Nile virus activity. This is pretty normal. Usually as it begins to cool down, we're going to see that activity really start to fall off. Just last week, we did report that there have been 2 human cases of West Nile virus in the county. We've had 88 positive mosquito sample pulls, and then we had 5 dead birds and 0 horse cases in the county as of this week. Our first positive mosquito was detected in West Roseville. That's exactly where it was detected the previous year, over in that West Park neighborhood that's close to rice fields and a lot of mosquito activity. And then we've also been doing aerial and ground-based treatments to help us kind of try to control this virus as it has been spreading. So a reminder of what citizens of Auburn can do to protect themselves, but using an EPA registered repellent is the most important. Those are repellents that contain ingredients like DEET, picaridin, oil of lemon eucalyptus. We also encourage them to dump and drain standing water. So that's all standing water. Standing water is the biggest breeding source for mosquitoes. And then also, if they're experiencing anything unusual or just have general questions, our website is a platform for many questions that they might have, or they could just give us a call, submit an online form, and we could come out and help them with whatever they're experiencing. So we have detected invasive Aedes mosquitoes again in our county. So the last time I think I was here was actually in 2019, where we were first reporting on our invasive Aedes discovery. That was in South Placer County, close to the Citrus Heights border. You know, mosquitoes don't know county border lines, so they came right over into Placer County and made themselves at home. We didn't find them in 2020 and 2021, but as of this summer, we have detected them. In July, they were detected in Granite Bay, and then they've been detected in Roseville neighborhoods of Crest Haven, Thiels Manor, and Cherry Glen. These mosquitoes are important because they have the ability to transmit diseases like Zika, dengue, chikungunya, and yellow fever. Now, those are some very scary disease names. Those aren't circulating in the county, so we don't have that risk right now, but there is the ability to have that risk if there was to be a source of those diseases in our county. So invasive Aedes, similar to the West Nile virus spreading mosquitoes, you want to do the same protection measures. You want to make sure you're using an EPA registered repellent, dumping and draining all standing water. And for these mosquitoes, they need teeny tiny amounts of water to be able to breed. They like very deep interlaid areas of pots and plant saucers and water, what are those things called? How you water your plants. Watering pots. Thank you. They like those. And so with those, you're not only getting rid of that water, you need to scrub that water off. You want to make sure that it's completely dry because again, they can breed in very tiny amounts of water. And then also these mosquitoes like to bite during the daytime. So any unusual daytime biting, you want to report to our district so that we could come out and make sure that these mosquitoes aren't spreading throughout our county. So this is just a quick glimpse at the invasive Aedes response plan we've been doing since we found these mosquitoes in July. Our staff has been hard at work, even doing, I think they were out there at 2 a.m. this week doing a treatment before people went out to work. But we're doing enhanced surveillance, so looking for those cryptic sources where these invasive Aedes mosquitoes might be hiding. We're doing door-to-door inspections. So I know we're in Auburn, but the residents of Roseville have been very kind, letting us into their backyards and look for these mosquitoes and treat for these mosquitoes. We're doing additional trapping throughout the areas where we found them. And then, like I said, doing treatments, both adulticide and larvicide treatments in these neighborhoods. And then after each treatment and after each week, really, we're going back and assessing what we're doing and seeing how we could try our best to eradicate these mosquitoes, although they've continued to spread throughout California. So, and then zone 5 specific trends in Auburn. Like I mentioned, we do see tick activity up here in the foothills on hiking trails. You know, our best bet for citizens is to stay on the trail. Don't go out into the brush because that's when you're going to really see more tick activity. And then when you get home, be sure that you're checking for ticks on yourself and your pets to make sure you're not bringing them into your home. And then that limits the risk of tick-borne disease spreading. Our ticking activity starts this week. So we actually have staff members that go out into the hiking trails. They're going to take these big felt flags, run it over the brush. We take those ticks back to our lab where they're tested, and we report out that information. We don't do tick testing for citizens because if they got bit by a tick, we want them to go to their doctor, not take the tick to our district for us to test it and get that information back to them. We do see a lot of standing water in the city of Auburn, which is a big source of mosquito breeding. So it's important to just make sure that ditches, cars, buckets, trash barrels, anything that can hold water is empty. And so our technicians do community-wide surveillance in the city of Auburn where they're going to those standing water sources and making sure that they're treated. And then lastly, our technician who oversees Zone 5 gave us this information about some of these specific Auburn trends, but we also do have some mosquito breeding in the water treatment plant. So we're working on that relationship to make sure we have access. So that's it for me for our annual update. Are there any questions?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yes, Councilwoman Vidal Harris.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I don't necessarily like the things you're talking about, but I appreciate the information. It's very helpful. A couple quick questions. There are a lot of people who have, especially in the little more rural areas, ponds or water features that aren't necessarily, they're sometimes moving water, but not moving enough. How do you normally recommend for them to kind of treat their own ponds or water that they want to have around?
Yeah. Great question. Usually in the spring is when we ask those residents to contact our district so that we can have technicians come out and see if those standing water sources need mosquito fish. Mosquito fish are a great preventative solution. And if we get there ahead of time, they could be great. Now, at this time of year, especially as temperatures start to drop at night, mosquito fish aren't going to be the best solution for ponds and water features. So we want to get ahead of it and hopefully keep those adult mosquitoes from emerging. So yeah, they can contact our district. They could report a problem for standing water and specifically mosquito fish, and our technicians will come out, do an inspection of their standing water source and make sure that mosquito fish is the best solution for whatever type of pond or standing water source they have.
Okay, great. My other question was, when you talk about treatments, I know there's different kinds of treatment. Can you explain what you mean when you treat a neighborhood versus treating a standing water? Is it mosquito fish? What else?
We could do other types of treatments. So we do community-wide treatments for when there's West Nile virus risk. Those could be aerial treatments or ground-based treatments, larvicide treatments, or adulticide. Now, larvicide is going to attack those immature mosquitoes, while adulticides are going to look to kill off the adult mosquitoes. And neighborhoods are going to see the truck-based treatments, kind of like you would imagine, like the old school trucks with the sprayer on the back, where our aerial treatments are going to be by low-flying plane. In the city of Auburn, I can't tell you what our latest treatments have been. Again, we don't see that much West Nile virus up here, so you're not going to be seeing those kinds of treatments out this area.
Do residents need to be concerned about when planes are flying and spraying stuff, things like that?
Great question. So all of the treatments that we do and the chemicals that we use are EPA registered ingredients, and the listing of those are all on our website. And again, they've been approved by the EPA, and our technicians are CDPH, California Department of Public Health registered technicians.
Okay, great.
Who apply the treatments.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Are you finished? Okay, great. Yes, Mr. Belant.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Megan, thank you for your presentation tonight. Kind of on the same line of questioning, is there anything particular that the council and city leadership can do to help you in your mission to eradicate these evil mosquitoes and ticks?
Spreading information to citizens on just how to protect themselves is the most important. We want people to be helping us do our job by protecting themselves, their families, their pets. So we always kind of talk about the 3 Ds of mosquito prevention and the 5 Ds of tick prevention. So for mosquito prevention, that's dumping and draining standing water, defending yourself with a repellent, and then calling the district is that 3rd D. And for tick prevention, there's quite a few, detaching the tick, defending yourself also with the EPA registered repellent. We could always use your help in spreading those prevention messages. Citizens can also subscribe to our email notifications that update them on our district's activities, when we're doing treatments, and then also how to protect themselves. So we could really use your help with just that. And I could send out information quarterly to you to be sending that out to the citizens of Auburn.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I don't want to sign up everybody, but I would think all 5 of us would love to be on that email list because it's going to be hard for all of us to remember in the springtime when mosquito fish and some of these other preventative things are available. So
Right.
feel
Will do.
free to sign all of us up
Okay.
on that. So thank you, Megan.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, well, thank you very much. I was just gonna kind of follow up on the mosquito fish, and I think they're great. So,
Yeah.
now you said that folks can contact your office. How is the best way to contact you? Via website, if they want to request the mosquito fish, which are free, correct, in the spring?
Yes, so they can actually submit a problem report on our website in the spring. It's pretty easy on our website. There's a how do I button and there's a report a problem button. It'll take you directly to a form you fill out. You type in your address, you click that you have a standing water source and you'd like mosquito fish, and that gets sent directly to our technicians who actually come out, do the inspection and provide the mosquito fish.
And can you just, for the purposes, our meetings are live streamed.
Yes,
What is your website?
placermosquito.org.
placermosquito.org. Okay.
And if they are not able to use a website, you can call our district at 916-380-5444.
380-5444. 5444. Great. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. And even for folks that have livestock, the water troughs can
Right.
be a great place to have fish. My mom has her water troughs for the horses full of mosquito fish, and they live through the winter because they're able to go down pretty deep. So, and stay warm. So great. Seeing that there are no additional comments or questions. Thank you so much for your report. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. And I will invite the public, if there's anybody that has any comment to make on this. Is just a presentation, but nobody. All right. Thank you.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Have a nice evening. Appreciate that. All right. Next item on the agenda is item number 7. This is the yes on Measure E for Auburn Schools 2022 committee presentation.
Thank you so much, Mayor Pro Tem Covia and members of the council. I appreciate it. And actually, this presentation, I was kind of laughing as you guys were talking about the state mandates that were coming your way in the new state laws. And I couldn't help but think like, oh, hey, first time as a school district. And, some of the stuff that I'll be talking to you about tonight is actually born directly out of some state laws that came from us. So thank you so much for having us. And thank you for the opportunity to address you all this evening. I'm Heather Leslie, and I'm the Chief Business Officer for Auburn Union School District. And I'm volunteering my time tonight as committee member for the Yes on E campaign for Auburn schools. And with me this evening is also committee members Kathy Allen and our district superintendent, Amberly Alva. So on November 8th, Auburn Union School District has placed a general obligation bond measure on the ballot in order to ask our community for support in funding some overdue facility modernization and repairs at our local elementary and middle schools. We really have 2 key priorities at Auburn Union. The first is to make sure we have academic success for every student attending one of our schools. And second, to make sure that our school facilities and grounds are safe, secure, modern, and equipped to provide the best educational environment possible. You'll hear in an upcoming video that we will present about how old some of our buildings are. And I think the only oldest building that we could have for the Auburn Union School District is the one we're in right now. But I think the best way for me to really give this example is from somebody who's been in the community for a very long time. I think of our newest school as being quite new. So I still look at the Auburn Elementary School as new, as that neighborhood as new to us. But when you really start aging it out from when it opened, we're coming up on 30 years that school has been in operation, and it has not had modernization or upgrades once during that time. So while a bond measure has been in discussion for many years in the school district and has evidently gone forward many, many years ago, as well as a parcel tax measure, we're now in a position where facility improvements are paramount of need, and we have a solid foundation finally which to go forward with this measure. In addition, Auburn Union School District proudly has paid off nearly $40 million in certificates of participation debt within this last year, which was the funding mechanism originally utilized to construct Skyridge Elementary and Auburn Elementary that I already discussed. So while these are funding mechanisms for schools to use, they are expensive and are at a high risk factor for public agencies alike. A general obligation bond is a much more conservative and responsible approach for funding capital improvements. Measure E has the ability to allow our school district to provide well-rounded education and retrofitting buildings to implement better science, technology, energy, and in engineering, math, arts, and we can retain and attract quality teachers with safe and collaborative spaces and upgrading our technologies. We can better attract families and students with modern amenities comparable to surrounding districts. We can repair leaky roofs, gas lines, and aging plumbing and other infrastructure. We as a community with this measure can come together and help enhance school safety with fencing, gates, improved fire suppression and warning systems, and updating locks and entries. And importantly to me, we can improve access for student and staff with disabilities by becoming more compliant with the Americans with Disability Act. It's no surprise to any of you, I'm sure, that the state of California does not adequately fund our schools for a lot of these improvements. In fact, they don't fund really at all, just generally for any new construction or for any modernization or upgrades. They fund, but not adequately, major repairs. However, if this measure is successful, Auburn Union School District would have the ability to apply for state matching funds for approved projects. This is money we would be unable to access without being able to declare and certify that we had a local match. And Auburn Union, as you may know have heard, doesn't actually have additional funding available in order to certify for large projects or for capital improvements of this nature. This district has engaged in many assessments over the years of our buildings. And in 2017, our facility needs reached just under $100 million. So obviously, it's not going to make that. And obviously in 2017 numbers, the costs have increased significantly in building. While $45 million that Measure E would provide the district is not going to get us there completely, with matching state funds, it's going to get us further than this community has ever seen. If Measure E is unsuccessful though, I know that our cost of repairs and improvements will only grow more expensive. The biggest piece for me as a community member myself and as a committee member is knowing that this Proposition 39 bond measure is set up with taxpayer protections. Measure E funds could only be utilized towards projects that are outlined in the ballot language project listing. It requires a citizens oversight committee to review those expenditures. It cannot be used for administrative salaries, and it cannot be taken away by the state. This bond measure would be a maximum annual tax of $28 per 100,000 of assessed value of your home. So when thinking about that, it's not really market value. Something that really was possibly someone has owned for quite a few years, may market value currently be much higher. It's the assessed value. So for an example, if a home assessed at $400,000, that would only equal approximately $112 annually in taxes. And while we can all agree that each of us are feeling the pressure of inflation, the TK 8th grade students of Auburn Union deserve the same opportunities and learning and environments, like I said, of surrounding districts and are able to provide, I'm sorry, I'm going to bring that back. So we feel the inflation, but Auburn Union students deserve the same opportunities and learning environments that surrounding districts are able to provide only because of bond measures like this. Improved schools not only strengthen the community, but they also strengthen the attractiveness to Auburn area to families. Amy, would you mind running the video for us? So this video was graciously donated to us by Intervoice Media. And learning environments that surround. That's me.
Hi, this is Jim Holmes, Placer County Supervisor for District 3 and also a former trustee of the Auburn Union Elementary School District, and yes, on Measure E supporter. If you care about improving the quality of education in our Auburn elementary and middle schools, there's nothing more important on the ballot than Measure E. Measure E would make long overdue facilities repairs and upgrades to our Auburn schools. Some of our schools were built in the 1940s. They are in desperate need of attention. If Measure E does not pass, our students' education will suffer. I've seen firsthand the need for these repairs and improvements. They are critical to keep our students safe and learning effectively. Here's what our principals have to say.
My name is Dr. Lori Balsano Wright, and I am the principal here at Skyridge. I've been here for 3 years, and I'm a proud member of the Falcon family. So here at Skyridge School, we are on a 5-year journey to become an accredited STEAM school. So I believe that with updated facilities, we could have a really great STEAM lab. We have a maker space, but gosh, the things that we could do with an updated space with labs and outdoor education, we could do some improvements to our garden. I think that with the bond, if it were to pass, we would really be able to meet that goal within the 5 years and really enhance the learning here at Skyridge.
Hi, I'm Christine Mayberry, principal of the E.B. Kane Middle School, home of the Wildcats. For me, the biggest need for our students is during lunchtime. They finally get a good 40-minute break to have lunch and hang out with their friends, but it's hard to do when we don't have enough seating for everybody. We don't have enough spaces for any lunch period to sit in. So the 6th grade can usually fit in E.B. Kane Station or the gym if we have bad weather. There's no way our 7th and 8th graders can all eat in one spot, all stay dry, and all stay out of the sun when we have those, those really hot days.
Mail your ballot in today and make your vote count for Auburn Union Schools and students. Vote yes on E.
Thank you. So, and again, once again, it's been wonderful to be able to come and talk to you guys. And we are hoping as a committee that you'll please consider approving a resolution in support of Measure E for Auburn schools.
Thank you.
And I'm open to any questions.
Okay, colleagues, I'd like to open this up. Are there any questions? Any questions?
Question. There was when we were talking about in our Economic Development Commission, there was some concern that this money would be used in place of other money to fund things you were already planning on funding. How does that work? And the supplement, not supplant piece of this, how does that all work?
Well, I'd love to say that we actually had funds available. I think that there's a misunderstanding on that. I think that there's again, like I tried to address, the state funds us to do these types of upgrades or modernizations, which they actually don't. So we receive a very minor amount in what we consider developer fees. As you guys know, there's not a lot of development that's happening, but that also is open for any other large improvements that we would need. And so right now, just to give you an example, I'm looking at approximately $2 million in needed roofing right now. So obviously our developer fees aren't going to go that far. The second piece that I would have available would be through our previous community facility district or Melrose district. Previously that had been all earmarked just strictly for the debt payments. When I talked about repaying that $40 million in debt, because we were able to repay that, we have one outstanding 1999 certificate of participation that we were unable to pay off early. It's just not structured that way. So about 50 to 60% of those Melrose fees are actually going to make that annual payment. So we're not tying up or keeping our general fund in the lurch for the remainder of that. And that's only going to go out until the year 2030. But again, that takes away from that minor amount of those tiny CFD areas that we have. The only other true capital facility money we have available is when we liquidate an investment to pay off those certificates of participation. We had a little bit left over. We had approximately $900,000 that was left over, and that's currently sitting in our capital facility fund.
Okay, great.
So I think net right now, we'd have approximately $1 million in our capital facility funds. Like I said, I have about $2 million in just roofing needs.
You did what I've worked with you on a couple of different things, and one of the examples that kind of hit home for me was when you were talking about putting in a shade structure. Can you share that? Oh, how hard it is to put in a shade structure? Just how not easy it is to put in something.
It's so not. So when I've given workshops and stuff previously around the state when I was consulting, one of the things I always said is no shade structures because it's such a pain. And everybody's like, what do you mean? They only cost like $10,000, $30,000, and they're pre-approved. So you guys were speaking about Division of State Architect and approvals for schools, similar thing. The problem is that we can just take those plans, but as a school district, we're not allowed to just throw it on. We actually have to take that into Division of State Architect and have it cited. So essentially a registered architect with DSA or Division of State Architect has to take those plans and essentially insert them. And they have to basically make sure that it meets all of the structural needs and requirements that DSA has on schools, which is vastly different than any other public agency. I think the only next one is fire stations at this point. And essentially you have to show ADA compliance starting from the parking lot. So I think many of you probably have been to some of our parking lots. If you can imagine, like, just for example, let me throw Rock Creek out there. It kind of comes at a slant, but you have to show current code ADA compliant parking and then path of travel all the way from that parking spot through the campus to wherever you place a shade structure and call out a currently code compliant boys restroom, girls restroom, and staff restroom. So just installing one shade structure can cause upwards of $500,000 for a school district. So as we'd started in this journey, we had originally called out, due to COVID, outdoor learning environments, which included installation of shade structures, especially our sites that didn't have them. And you guys allocated, I want to say $500,000, $600,000 to it originally, this $600,000. It was right before I came onto the district. And as I took an architect with us from site to site, we found that our compliance for Americans with Disability Act, or ADA compliance, was so far out of whack, it was going to cost more than what we had allocated just to bring one site code compliant to put a shade structure on. So we couldn't even go forward to place shade structures at our sites because we were so far out of compliance. And that unfortunately is just something, again, even with our new site, Auburn Elementary, was 30 years ago. I mean, you guys know just as well as I do, we've probably had 15 to 20 changes to the code since that time. So those areas are obviously out of current compliance, unfortunately.
If I may value add and address your question, as I'm out in the community speaking at different organizations or at our fabulous chamber mixers, one of the questions I get, to your point, is that all these schools have gotten all this crazy one-time money, and it's true. We cannot spend it fast enough, but those dollars are very, very restricted. We cannot spend them on buildings, on maintenance, on repairs. They have to be spent for extended learning opportunities, before school, after school daycare, interventions, et cetera, et cetera. We're such a great pair because she's my business person and I'm the former kindergarten teacher, right, who deals with the kids. So not that you don't. So we have a $20 million budget, and 85% of that is for salaries and benefits. So that only leaves us 15% to pay the light bill, the water bill, the gas bills, et cetera, all the things that go into running a business. And so what this money would be is to help us really repair and modernize our schools and make them attractive, which this is my 8th district from Northern California to Southern California. When you do this, your home property values go up. Everyone wants to look out their door and see a beautiful school building. So Heather shared with you the story of $2 million of roofs. Well, here's the kid side of that. At Rock Creek, we had some leaky roofs, $2 million to repair the roof, but we had $50,000 worth of damage to books. So these are books that are not in kids' hands because they were water damaged. And with our supply chain issues, reordering them with just funds we don't have. Then to share another ADA compliant, which I know speaks to your heart, we have a school, Alta Vista, who is not ADA compliant. And when you have a ramp, it has to zigzag, so there's natural stops. It's a very steep ramp. And it's not before my time, but it breaks my heart to share this story. We have a student that had cerebral palsy, was in a wheelchair, was going down the ramp to the playground, and the ramp got out of control and she tumbled. Well before all of our. Now, she only suffered with minor cuts and scrapes and bruises, but that's not okay. That's not okay for our kids. So we have to, and you look at other schools in our district, I won't name the names of them, but I was driving by one the other day on the way to my daughter-in-law's house, and they have these beautiful facilities down the hill. Good friend of mine, Dirk Garcia, superintendent Roseville City. I've seen some of schools and it's just like, it kills me. It's like, our kids deserve that. So I'll get off my soapbox now and answer any other questions, but it's just something I'm very passionate about.
I don't have any more questions, just some comments.
Thank you. Mr. Spokley.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. You touched on it in your last comments there just a moment ago, but with the CARES and different one-time funding sources that have come from the federal government, some of the things listed in the little staff report that we got in our packet talk about air conditioning improvements and things like that. Aren't those funds eligible to be used on things like that for your schools?
Yes, in fact, many of them are. And in fact, we had quite a lot of heating, air conditioning, and ventilation exchanges and improvements during the COVID time. So we had quite a few that were changed out, which was paid for with one-time funds. When you look at the scope of what some of the other districts get though in COVID funding and what Auburn receives, because, we're not a large district anymore. We used to be, 3,500 kids, 4,000 kids, and we're at about 1,500 right now. So we obviously don't qualify for as much of state funding as people would imagine. So, but again, even if you took all those funds, it's just say that they were not unrestricted. They just dropped money in our lap. I think when last I calculated it up, we had almost $3 million in funds. So even if I could just use those for anything, which I can imagine would not have gone over well, if I would have said, here's $3 million for COVID, I'm going to go replace the roofs. I think that probably would have not gone over well. But again, when we look at, a possibility of $4 million up against, $100 million in need, it just really wouldn't go far anyway. So it's like, that's just like a little titch, but we kind of need everything else to really go forward. Amber.
And if I can value add to that, I'm sure as your city manager shared with you, throughout the COVID pandemic, we received different pots of money. And each pot of money, there was like ESSER 1, ESSER 2, ESSER 3, ELOP, ELOG, CARES, lots of acronyms. The state loves to use their acronyms. Each pot of money came with its own restrictions. So the first pot of money, to your point, was really to address some facility needs, air ventilation, extra sanitation. And so as part of our negotiation process with our Auburn Union Teachers Association, they were demanding MERV 13 filters. And so we just spent all of our Prop 39 money and redid the majority of our HVAC systems, but we only had MERV 8. We didn't have MERV 13. I don't understand what all that means, but we spent a couple $1 million of that CARES money upgrading to MERV 13 so that our teachers would agree to come back in safe conditions so that we can get your children in the city of Auburn back to school much quicker than most districts in the state of California. I live in the San Juan Unified School District. My daughter did not go back to school until March 2021. She was home. So, but we can proudly say in the city of Auburn, we brought our kids back early and safely.
Great. Thank you very much. Just one more quick question. You mentioned it in the presentation, but this bond measure, these funds will solely be used for your facilities, not for salaries, administrative, any of that. It's just for facilities.
Correct. The state is very clear on our parameters for that. So this particular type of bond measure, a Prop 39 bond, we have to very specifically line out a project list and kind of speak to everything that we would spend money on. And it's very clear as to what we cannot spend money on. And that is one of the things. So we can't just take it and, fund our public employee retirement benefits liability. We can't just take it and, give ourselves a new car or something like that. That would be very much frowned upon. But no, we have to very much stick to that project list. And that's what the oversight committee is geared towards. So I think they recommend usually quarterly, if I'm correct on that, Kathy. Quarterly, they have to come in and they review each one of the expenses to make sure that it coincides with something on that project list.
And shameless plug alert. So we will be reaching out to all of our Auburn citizens and our city council members to also be part of this bond oversight committee. It's a very public, very transparent, the agenda, the minutes, everything's published because a bond program, and this is, again, I've passed many bonds in my career. A bond only works when you have partnership between the city and the school district. You need your taxpayers and your oversight people to really help guide us because we're in the business of teaching and learning children, and you all are in the business of running a city, right? And running businesses.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Just one quick question. My colleagues obviously have asked some very good questions. When is the last time you attempted to pass a bond?
So I will look to know. Okay. I believe that it was in 2004. We went out for a bond and did not pass. And then I believe it was in 2007. We went out for a parcel tax and also did not pass. And here's an interesting thing that I would like to inform the public on. I'm a taxpayer myself and I get my tax bill. And personally, I have a high school district bond on my tax bill. I have an elementary district bond and I have a community college. Many of our residents will see multiple districts. And that's something that in my tenure here, the city of Auburn has struggled to understand that we are a separate district from Placer High School. Placer High School Union School District passed a bond in 2018, and they're doing some great work in our city. We are not part of that bond. We did not receive any funds from that bond. And same thing with Sierra Community College. I can't remember when they passed their bond. So it's a totally separate tax and a separate bond, but each one is their own local educational authority.
If I can quickly add to that, in 2010, when I was the board president, we did go out for a partial tax.
Okay,
It
so
was a
10, sorry.
$59 one, and we only got about 55% of the vote. So 2010 was the last time.
Okay, so it was 20, so 04, 7, and 10 then? So,
I think it was just 04 and 10. I didn't have it in front of me. And just a side note is that they've since that time, new legislation, as we've kind of alluded today, California loves to have their new legislation. They've lowered the threshold for a general obligation bond. It is now 55%. At one point, over my last 26 years, it was up to 65%.
yeah, that's
And in initial polling and surveying of our community, with the plus or minus of the margin error, we have that support in our Auburn community.
Thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, I'll just open this up for any public comment. Is there any public comment on the item? Thank you. Yeah, sure. Come on up.
That's where I take my piece of.
Kathy Allen, used to be on the board as well, Auburn Union School District Board, and just recently retired a few years back from Sac City Unified, where I was the chief operations officer. So did this kind of work for about 30 some odd years. Lot bigger dollars, but same problems, same issues, same battle with the state, same, trying to get local funds. I think it's important to emphasize that a lot of people think that the maintenance money should be fixing all the problems that we have, right? So by state law, if you participate in the state school facility building program, 3% of your general fund expenditures, not your general fund, but your expenditures, has to be given to maintenance for routine restricted repair. But that's like replacing a condenser motor when it breaks. That's not replacing an entire roof. That's a capital improvement. So there is no dedicated funding stream from the state to do capital improvements. We like to call it a three-legged stool. So the one leg is when the state has bond money, which they do right now, Prop 51, but that money is going to be allocated by the end of next year. It'll be gone. We're not going to get obviously a state bond on 2022 because we are getting some general fund money, which is pretty unusual, about 2.8 million or billion, I think. But you have to get in line to get that money. And you have to, as Heather said, you have to have matching funds to get that money. It's a requirement. Otherwise, you can't even apply. The second leg of that stool are developer fees. So in fast growing communities like Elk Grove or even Rockland Roseville still, developer fees are flooding in, right? Well, they're not flooding in here. So now we're down to one leg of a stool, and that is a local general obligation bond. I think it's very important to recognize the district for the work that they have done without hitting up the taxpayers. I mean, they did try and hit up the taxpayers, but didn't get it. And I mean, look at all that they've been able to do, right? They built 2 schools without a general obligation bond. And those of you who've been around a while might remember Joe Sura, but he was pretty good at doing that. So I think they've done more than a yeoman's job of making everything that they've accomplished to date do so without taxpayer assistance. And now it's finally time to ask the taxpayers to help. So that was my spiel. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Thank you very much for your presentation today. This was an informational item only at this time. So, and I know that some of my colleagues have endorsed this measure publicly. And so that certainly is their right to do so. So I do appreciate that. And thank you very much for your presentation this evening. All right, the next item on the agenda is item, turn over my page, is our pavement management and maintenance report for fiscal year 2022-23. Very exciting. And 2026 to 2027.
Good evening, Madam Mayor Pro Tem and honorable council members. Pleasure to see you as always. Thanks, Amy. My name is Menjaldeen, Public Works Manager. Tonight before you, what we're bringing is the draft fiscal year 22-23 to 26-27 pavement management report. As staff has promised to bring back before council. So tonight, a few things that we're going to go over. We're going to address the roadway overlay report and how it was developed, the structure and format of the report, some brief highlights from the report, kind of bring to light the pavement evaluation zone, and then again, we're going to address the pavement maintenance schedule and the recommendations that council might want to have for this project moving forward. Pavement management report and maintenance report, sorry. The city implemented a new pavement management software program, Street Saver, in 2021. The program was used to analyze the pavement condition for the city streets and lay forth a workable, affordable plan for improving the useful life of city streets over a 5-year period, while reducing the costs and preserving streets through deferred maintenance. The key to effective maintenance and street maintenance and rehabilitation is knowing when to carry out the type of maintenance and the rehabilitation and execution of the plan on time. So on this slide, you're going to kind of see the city streets laid out as to what they are. We have arterials, collectors, local, some others. The others are usually private roads and things of that nature, or some things that are driveways that people think are roads, might not necessarily be. And then there's going to be the state's expressways. And if you look at the chart below, it'll kind of give you the pavement condition index for each one of those. You can see that our arterials are at about a 70%. Collectors are slightly below that, and the local roads are just below that. And the private roads are by far our worst condition. Development and methodology of how staff came up with the pavement condition index and the road report structure. The city's pavement management plan relied heavily on Street Saver, the pavement condition and inventory software program. The program categorized the city streets mainly by 2 attributes: functional class and the pavement condition index. These 2 attributes were taken into consideration when laying out the pavement management plan. Public Works Department staff also broke up the city into 8 different pavement evaluation zones, which you'll see on a later slide. These zones help to break down the city into smaller areas of focus and allow for better organization and cost savings when planning out project areas. The functional class determines how the roadway is currently being utilized, i.e., is it a collector, or is it a local road, or is it a state highway? The pavement condition index is a measure on a scale from 0 to 100, calculated using collected stress information, 0 being the worst condition a roadway could ever possibly be in. We would hope that we would never see that in our city. And 100 being the best possible condition. That's something that's also very impossible. Like, you may have a freshly paved road or freshly overlaid road, and within a couple months, it'll be 98, which is still a fantastic road, but it's really hard to keep a roadway at 100%. The pavement evaluation zones were established based on geographic proximity in order to better keep track of the past year's projects and plan future roadway work. The city's public works staff broke down the city limits into 8 different pavement evaluation zones, which will be highlighted shortly in an upcoming slide. On this slide, you're going to get a sense of what's going on with the city. Here is the pavement condition index based off of how the overall process is. The city currently has about 30 streets. Let me say this, sorry. 30 streets will be assessed and treated with either a maintenance or a rehabilitation treatment. Maintenance treatments are for less intense, and they're less intense and less expensive and less time consuming. Common techniques for maintenance include crack sealing, slurry sealing, chip sealing, and a cape sealing, which is a combination of a chip seal and a slurry seal. Rehabilitation treatments are more invasive, more costly, and take more time to complete. These treatments are triggered and suggested by the Street Saver program once a pavement condition has deteriorated beyond basic pavement preservation techniques. Here on this slide, you're going to see how staff broke down the pavement evaluation zones. There's 8 zones within the city. The northernmost zones kind of depicts the area above Luther Road in the North Auburn region. I know Councilmember Berlant does not like that word. It's not a geographic location. But then there's Central Auburn, Old Town, a high school downtown, the Canyon area, South Auburn, and Indian Hill and the airport. This map on the right-hand side, you can't see it very well, but if you look, I wish this kind of had better coloring on it. You'll see that area 3, 4, and 5 are the highest areas of need. That's where the biggest red areas are. That indicates that the pavement condition index are quite low within those regions. That represents our Old Town, downtown, and some of the areas surrounding it. 3, 4, and 5. 3, 4, and 5. Here. So additional considerations is that asphalt pavement that experiences low levels of traffic can last 25 years or more. That life can be substantially extended and provide greater return on your pavement investment if proper maintenance is performed on a regular and timely basis. When determining the maintenance process within the city limits, a 20-year pavement cycle for each road was the approach we took. This meant increased lifespan for the marginal roads and addresses high traffic areas prior to failure, which would allow for the increase of the PCI gradually at the current funding levels. Currently, nearly 58% of the city maintained roads are in very good condition, with an additional 20% falling in a good region. After the last round of roadway work, staff's proud to admit that the PCI was increased from 66, which when we originally brought this to council, to 67. That doesn't seem like a lot, but when you think that the state average for PCI is 66 and raising your PCI by 1 point with just one round of roadway work, that's significant. Oh, I apologize for that. If you look here on this slide, you'll see this is a 5-year layout plan. We want to make sure that everyone is aware of that. But here you'll see 10 years. Staff intends to bring to council for consideration within these years an overlay and a surface treatment in each fiscal year. We think that that keeps us within that 20-year cycle, and we get a good return on our investment for our pavement plan, as suggested by the Street Saver program. In 22-23, you'll see overlay and surface treatment will be done in zone 4. If you go back here, sorry, I apologize. You'll see zone 4 is the center core of the city, what we're calling the high school downtown area. And if you look on the map on the right, you'll see that that's the area with the most red, the most deterioration, and where the pavement condition index is at its lowest point. So it made sense that in 22-23, this is the area that we primarily focus on.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm a little confused. So you're gonna pave and overlay every road, or you're gonna pick certain roads in each one?
The pavement, Street Saver pulls roads from within this region and said, if you address these roads with this funding availability, this is how you're going to get to a higher pavement condition index. Every road in that region isn't going to get done. It's just the ones that's going to help the city. Generally, how that's done, it takes the arterials and collectors first because they're the ones that see the most work. And then it says pave these, and you do pavement, and then you do surface treatment on the other roads. Not all of them, but some of them, because not all of them have needs.
So each year you'll have a list of roads that corresponds in one of those zones that you'll give. Okay. So
for 22-23, council will be making a decision based on zone 4 for overlay and surface treatment. In 22-23 and 24, you'll see zone 2 and zone 3, and that's where we're going to have the biggest effect based off of the information that Street Saver has provided. Okay. So, as I mentioned previously, year 1 rehabilitation recommendations looks like this. You'll see it's in that central area. These are the roads that we're all familiar with that are quite bad. We have Orange Street, we have Maple Street, which coming off of Highway 80 and heading into Old Town, it's pretty much deteriorated. A lot of work is needed there. And based off of the amount of cars that travel there, that's the area that we should focus on first. In addition to that, it also recommends that we do surface treatment in the same zone. Because as you can see here, these roads are not necessarily all the way gone, but they can be preserved and get us on that 20-year cycle if we do some work here now. Not saying that we're not going to touch these roads in this section within the next 10 years, because if you look back on this in zone 4, we'll come back to that for another overlay 8 years from now. I look to council now for any questions that you might have. I know you have the report before you. It's this is very short. I like to keep it that way.
Thank you very much, Menzel. Appreciate that. I'll open this up for questions from my colleagues. Do I have any questions? Yes, Mr. Spokely.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Menzel, thank you very much for the report. It was great to finally get our hands on this and eyes on this. So a couple of questions. The Street Saver program that we're using, it anticipates or it projects out the rate of failure, the rate of degradation that we should see based on volumes that we've got on the various class of roads, right?
So basically what it does is sees how the roads are currently being used and the assigned PCI that it is currently. And if the city does absolutely nothing to those roads with that same volume and the volume not increasing or depreciating over that time, it gives a score. Now, that's not to say that that's going to be the most accurate thing. Every year or every 2 years, staff should still be putting additional information. Like, for instance, if we crack seal that road today, we need to put that information into the program because it may not change the PCI, but it may extend the degradation of that road by a few months or a few years.
So our previous road report was done in 2013.
Correct.
And here we are 2022 when we've redone the PCI index. So how often should we be doing this analysis of our roads based on physically going out and looking at the roads and giving that rating?
That's a fantastic question because one of the things that staff noticed that the road report that was done in 2013, we weren't able to fulfill that obligation because after the first 5 years, things changed significantly and we weren't able to keep with that schedule. In fact, we were mostly just approaching just overlay year after year because the surface treatment really didn't make a very big difference. That's why staff brought before you tonight just a 5-year report, as you see there, because that allows us to evaluate everything. I would say a realistic time frame every 3 years. As we change things, we look at it every 3 years and bring something back to council for consideration. This report and this program allows us greater flexibility in how we're doing, how we're putting out our roadway work, but it also gives the public an idea as to when they can expect to see work within their locale.
Thank you for that. So I'm not sure I heard it. Maybe you said it, but how often should your department go out and physically update?
I would say every 3 years.
Every 3 years. Okay, thank you. I'm trying to find it in the current report. Maybe you know it off the top of your head. What, maybe it was a 2013 report, but I remember seeing somewhere evaluation of, if the city had to replace all of our roads, some value was assigned to that. Was it in the hundreds of millions, right?
7 million.
Yeah, I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but I think it was $11 billion. It wasn't millions, it was billions.
I guess the point I want to make, and this is maybe a comment, but I'm going to say it anyway, is our roads are one of our biggest assets that we have in our city. So to see for so many years, decades, where we continue to underfund the roadway maintenance program or roadway maintenance work was one of the reasons why I ran for council. So I'm really happy to see this report. I do have some questions on the necessary funding moving forward. I think maybe you can just clarify for me, Menzel. In the staff report, I think there was a mention of $500,000.
So I should have been more clear about that. That 500,000 is the $500,000 that council has already committed to this program. It is an additional $500,000 staff is asking for. I want to say it was in 2012, council committed an additional $500,000 of general fund on top of the funds that we're currently using our local transportation funds to our streets and roads program. And that's the same $500,000. We're not asking for any more.
Okay. And in the report, I think I saw that on an annual basis to maintain the pace of this program for the next 5 years, we would need to invest 1.2 million.
So to maintain the pace that we're currently on, if we're keeping at 66 or 67, hovering just about there, our commitment would have to be 1.2 million, which is about where we're at currently, because currently we have $500,000 of general fund. We receive about $400,000 of local transportation fund and the additional SB1 funds that the city receives for streets and road program, along with the gas tax funds.
Totaling about 1.2.
1.2.
And what we've seen in the past, and these might even be before your time, Menjo, but we saw during economic challenging years, the first place we would go to cut funds would be roadway maintenance. So it's pretty critical that we try not to do that. I understand that we have to do what we need to do, but and I want to talk really quickly and ask you a couple of questions about the cost to do repairs. So resurfacing, lowest end of the cost spectrum.
Slurry sealing.
Slurry seal. Highest end of the cost spectrum is a road replacement.
Complete reconstruction.
Yeah. So I'm not going to put you on the spot and ask you costs per, square foot or whatever, but safe to say it's orders of magnitude more expensive to do the road replacement than it is to do the slurry sealing. So it's vital, right?
Significantly. And to your point, in the past, when we have cut transportation program and roadway work, we're seeing the true cost of that now, because the cost to do the roadway work has increased significantly. And where we may have saved $400,000 in the past, it's now costing us $800,000 to $900,000. So it's definitely perspective. So I do have some numbers. A slurry seal is about, I want to say 40 cents per square yard, whereas an overlay, and that's not a complete reconstruction, this is just an overlay, is about $3. So that's the difference.
Yeah. Okay. And John introduced in our last budget cycle, multi-year budgets for the city council. And Daniel mentioned this to me, but I was thinking the same thing. The idea of multi-year contracts we've talked about before, when we're talking about roadway maintenance, are we doing that yet? And if not, can we do that?
Yeah. So if you remember correctly, last year when we spoke, Councilmember Spokely, you gave us direction to reach out to the county to make sure that we're doing combined effort with them. We've sent all the paperwork to them. Our city attorney has looked at the documentation. It's now in their court to get back to us. I have to admit that they haven't been completely responsive on this, but they have had some staffing changes there. We've been reaching out to them to make sure that we're getting on their
schedule,
just so we can get that cost of savings. So it is something that we're currently working on, and that will allow us to do the multi-year program, because that's how the county approaches it, and that's the best way for us to do it as well.
Okay. I've got a bunch more comments, but I'll hold on. Let others.
I was
ask
just going to
questions.
make a quick point to our city manager. Let's put that on our 3x3, the status of that on our 3x3 meeting list. So thank you. Yes, Ms. Riddell Harris.
Thank you. The reason why I was asking that question, I think the lists on the staff report are a little bit more clear on which streets versus the zones, because I don't want it to be, people think it's optional. It's not, we're not picking anywhere in the zone. We're picking roads for particular reasons because of how bad they are. And I looked on the list, those are put in, I would assume, order. So if we don't get to something in the end, are we going to go from top to bottom, or are we picking? I guess there's a lot of people who would like to move their street up to the top of the list.
Absolutely.
And so I just want to make sure we're being very clear on the order in which we're planning to proceed. And it isn't going to be whoever yells the loudest or calls the right person that gets their road done.
So and that's the beauty of the way we're approaching this compared to how we've approached it in the past. The Street Saver program and the pavement management plan does allow us greater flexibility. However, with that being said, it clearly identifies the roads that should be done at what time to ensure that we're keeping our pavement condition index at a certain level.
Okay.
So.
Okay. All right. As long as we're keeping to that and not necessarily having people, whoever's the loudest, win. And then the other thing was, this is to keep them in the current condition they're in. I know there's a lot of interest in making things more walkable and bikeable. So once the circulation plan gets done, is that then when the bike lanes and other things can get incorporated into, and then that's because that'll be part of our maintenance and upgrading of our roads, correct?
So I forgot to mention this, included in this, in the roadway and the pavement condition index and how we're approaching our program. Essential safety and traffic components such as curb ramps, sidewalks, storm drains, street lights, and signals are also being considered. So
Okay.
when we're doing roadway work in a specific area,
Mhm.
as the young lady mentioned earlier tonight, the ramps are going to be looked at as well. You know, it's not just one aspect and we move on. It's all encompassing, because when we do roadway work and anything that's considered structural, we have a requirement to bring those things up to ADA compliance.
In the past, there was an issue where a bike lane just abruptly stopped because we worked on an area and then we didn't do the next area. Is that going to be an issue? Because there's, I mean, with bike lanes, continuity is kind of important.
No, absolutely. And I think I know the location you're probably talking about the Nevada Street Sidewalk Project. Again, the intention was to go back and add to that. We have staff looked at it, we have to start somewhere.
Yes,
Right.
agreed.
And the funding availability just was not there to continue that project up to Palm Avenue, which was, I think, the original plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but we're gonna, I guess, we're gonna come up with some kind of bike plan and then incorporate that into this as we go.
Absolutely. So all those things are going to be considered moving forward. And that's the flexibility that the Street Saver program allows, because as we say, hey, we're going to do bike paving, bike plans in certain, bike ways in certain areas, it's going to say, well, then you have to update these sidewalks and the curb ramps and everything else.
I just want to make sure we don't have one block with a bike lane, the next block doesn't, then the next block
Doesn't
does.
make sense.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just going to add to that point. The Nevada Street bike lane ends in the project about 30 feet from Fullweiler. That's, I think, the bigger issue is that it literally dead ends before you hit the intersection of Fullweiler that would then get you to the multi-modal station. And so I realize we're talking about streets tonight, but I 100% believe that that's something that needs to be followed up on. It was brought up, I think, with your predecessor, and I realize that there are some roadway width issues as well. But if you're riding a bike and you're encouraged to ride a bike, and then all of a sudden you have 30 feet with no signage that says you must now merge into the traffic, it's a safety issue. So just a quick comment.
No, I
that.
appreciate that.
A couple questions, Menjo. First, thank you very much. I think that the pavement condition indexing was number one here because, back to some of the earlier points, and I would assume my colleagues are all this way. I have never had so many people ask, when is my street, or why that street and not this one, than we did this year. Probably because Auburn Folsom is such a visible street, but everybody wants to know when. And so I think making sure that we have this PCI indexing really available. I know the report is up there, but I had some discussions early on about having it kind of be in a mapping program that's easy to use and easy to see, because I definitely am one that am okay with us being fluid. In 5 years from now, if a worse street in that zone needs to get a treatment, then it needs to be prioritized. There needs to be some level of flexibility, but I definitely would encourage that all of this be not just the report be posted, but make it as easy as possible, because you've done a lot of hard work. That report is really good.
That work was the work of Natalie Hammond.
No, I appreciate that. And it looks really good. The next step now is just getting it into maybe a map type of program. Anyways, thank you for answering the 5 years question versus 10, because that was, I know, our initial discussion. Talk to me about parking lots. Parking lots were included in the 2013 report. Just curious, what's the plan for the city-owned parking lots?
So staff has just entered into agreement with the folks from Street Savers to get our parking lots and our sidewalks now in this. Now, the next stage in that is just the assessment period. We have the ability to put the information and get the grading and the condition index for that in our system right now. It's just finding the time to actually get the information, gather the information and input it into the program. But as it's funny because we just started this process, I think about 3 to 4 days ago.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to that. I know the city-owned lot that is across from Kenmis and Walsh, the Depot Bay parking lot that we own, has a lot of really large potholes. And so even if it doesn't warrant, getting repaved or even a slurry seal, it needs some potholes. I mean, I pulled it up just to get the streets right on Google, and I can see the potholes on Google Map. And so I just want to make sure that our parking lots, our city-owned parking lots, are being accounted for. So thank you for already being ahead of that. The Auburn Folsom obviously is nearing completion. I've gotten a lot of questions, in the last couple of days, especially about the level of treatment. Most of it I know is a slurry seal. As we've talked about, it doesn't appear finished. It looks different than what we're used to in a full overlay. Curious your thoughts on is that what we can expect when we talk about a slurry seal in the future?
So it's important to note that a slurry seal or surface treatment really doesn't look ideal within the first couple of months. It has to get some rain on it, and it has to get some tires on it to really level it out. It's the intention is behind it isn't to get the prettiest road, it's to get a serviceable road. What Auburn Folsom had in the locations where we put the type 2 slurry into type 3 was a good roadway surface that needed just some preservation. So right now it looks really bad. It always looks worse until you get the paint for the lane markers on there and get everything in place. It'll always look bad. When it's complete, it'll look like a much better road. I guarantee you within a month, 2 months, after we've gotten some tires across the entire roadway surface, it'll look completely different.
Okay, 1 month. I will come back on November 10th and we'll have this discussion. But thank you for that update. And, thank you for all your work on that. I mean, I know that was a huge project, but it was a huge project, but I got to connect back and take your answer one step further. Councilmember Spokley asked about the multi-year project. You talked about combining our projects with the county, which I think are important. I was trying to remember just this weekend, I saw they were mobilizing right outside our city limits to do some work. And I was like, well, here is another opportunity that we lost. But that partnering with the county where we can is one thing, and probably getting the cost down. The question that I have, and I think was the question Councilmember Spokley had as well, is doing multi-year projects, meaning that when we go to bid, we're not just bidding this fiscal year, but we're bidding 2 fiscal years, especially because the last couple of years, we've done it right on the edge of the actual fiscal year. So it kind of makes sense from my perspective. And I guess that's kind of more of a question is, does it make sense for us to take 2 years worth of money, combine them into one bid to potentially try to get the mobilization? Well, not the mobile, you only have to pay one mobilization, but try to lower the overall cost because we're doing a larger product.
I absolutely think that that's a possibility. And I absolutely think there's some cost savings in doing that. I think this is the first year we actually have the ability to do that because we're operating on a 2-year budget cycle, which we weren't previously doing. We know what our funding is for this year and we know what it's going to be for next year for the most. So there's opportunity certainly to do that.
Well, I, for one, and I hope my fellow council members would join, would advocate that we do a multi-year bid and that we try to do it a little earlier. And now that we've committed the amount of dollars that you need, you worked magic. And I want to make sure you and the team get credit for having to deal with rain during this project, with a wildfire that had evacuations and sheltering, with the fairgrounds being used. Yeah, the fair occurring. If we can, and the start of school during that same time period. Right? It was
you remember
there were a lot of headaches for you. I think if we go out to bid earlier, maybe we can potentially get onto the schedule from these companies a little earlier. That's a compliment to you for maneuvering through that, but also an encouragement that we go out to bid a tiny bit earlier as well. That's all the questions I have. Again, thank you, Mindrel.
I do have one comment. I do realize that it was pointed out to me earlier today that I did spell Councilmember Daniel Calvillo's name incorrectly on the report. Before it is finalized out of the draft form, I will make sure to make that change.
But
Thank
you
you.
said it correctly too.
He said it correctly. My name is difficult. And I have to say bravo to the city clerk, because not only does she have to pronounce Dowden Calvillo, but there's the Auburn Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo. Giant mouthful. So, but thank you, Mendrell. I appreciate that. Thank you for fixing that. And thank you very much for the report. I appreciate that. I appreciate the comments, and I agree with what my colleagues have said. I did want to ask, and Councilman Berlant alluded to this a little bit, about making sure this information was available to the public. I mean, I'd love to just see this plan available on our website so that folks can just take a look at it. Because I mean, we talked about putting in a map or something, but this document itself is pretty user friendly and it's pretty easy to see. Oh, look, that part of my street. It's on the, on the schedule. So, and I'd love to be able just to point people, have it right on the website so that people can just find it super easy and look at it, because we do all get lots of questions with regards to when is my street next. So, appreciate it.
So once council accepts this document, if council so chooses to do so, this document will be live for the public to see, because we want to alleviate those questions. You shouldn't be answering those. They should come directly to us, or the information should be readily available so the public can see it.
Great. And I do appreciate that we are moving in this direction. I think that, the Street Saver program has just been a true, benefit to us. And I really appreciate seeing this schedule for the next 10 years. Some folks may not be happy to see that their streets are a little bit farther down, even though they're
Not on
PCI
at all.
or not on at all, but their PCIs are low. We also have to do it in terms of usage, as you mentioned, and then what else is being done in the area, because it makes it difficult to, let's tackle this street over here because it's got a low number, but then the rest of them are over there. I mean, so there's a lot that goes into that, and we just, respectfully request that our residents understand that as well. But yeah, so
Absolutely.
I want to open this up for public comment. Is there any public comment on this item? Yes, please come on up and to the lectern. State your name.
Hi, I'm Kelly Davis. I didn't plan to talk tonight, but I wanted to say thank you. I want to thank Council Member Riddell Harris for advocating for bikes and just the potential I think Auburn has for being a bikeable city. And I want to ask, how can a citizen get involved in making sure we're not 5 years down the road when we're resurfacing, fixing a bike lane or a bikeway, or, taking into account the true bikeability potential of this city and to be the endurance capital of the world. And you can't ride your bike to the grocery store. I rode my bike here tonight and I'm like on sidewalks and off, and looking at Auburn Folsom Road, there's the bike lane is this big and this it's pathetic. So I just here to advocate for bikes and know how we can get involved.
And we are working on our circulation plan, the circulation element for our general plan, and the bike and pedestrian elements of that as well. So there will be opportunity, and I know our city manager wants to.
Yeah. So a couple of things that are in the mix right now is circulation involves literally everything: cars, bikes, pedestrians, multimodal transportation. One of the things there are a couple of things that are included in that overall plan, which will have absolute public outreach. Within the scope of the work that we're getting is the idea that we will have what is known as an active transportation plan. And that's where all the bikes come in. As Councilmember Riddell Harris pointed out, about, hey, how are we going to get the bikes and all those types of things? Those types of things roll into the plan, and then invariably they roll into the funding for how they do that. So first thing up, circulation element. Next thing up, active transportation. And then finally, what you have is a bike and pedestrian master plan. All that folds into Councilmember Spoke. We talked about the capital improvement program. It's a cascading effect into that. So heads up for that. I know that is going to kick in sometime after the first of the year. So keep your eye out.
All right, cool. Thank you. I just want to say, as it's seeing all this pavement, I just get so excited to look for bike lanes. And I would just be so sad if Auburn got paved and bike lanes before an actual plan was in place to make it bikeable. So I hope you work together. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. Based on the question, I had the same question to Menjo earlier this week, and so I'm going to ask it again. Menjo, maybe you could talk about it. The chalking for the lines of Auburn Folsom throughout much of it really shrink what was there as I don't want to call it a bike lane, but that extra room on the side. Can you talk about what can we expect when they actually stripe it? Will it be back to where it was previously, or are there going to be areas where there are no areas for bikes to use?
Yeah, and that's the first thing I want to say is that those are not bike lanes in Auburn Folsom Road, so we're not encouraging people to ride their bikes there. Secondly, when the lines were taken off of Auburn Folsom Road, it was done by laser schematic. They took a laser print of what was out there. So more or less when it goes back out there, it's going to remember exactly where it was and it's going to put it back in the exact location. It may have looked like it shrunk because they put the line on the inside as opposed to the outside. So there is more area there than you may see visually because you're thinking the line may start there, but it's actually a little bit further. I know it's not a whole lot, but it was all done by laser. So it should go back exactly where it was. And if it doesn't, then it's up to the contractor to do so because that's part of the contract.
But do we want it to go back out exactly as it was? Are there, I guess, so John has talked numerous times about the wider the lane is, the faster people go. Everyone complains about how fast people go on that portion of Auburn Folsom. If we shrunk them down a little bit and we added a bike lane, what's the downside of that?
So without doing traffic analysis, there may be unintended consequences that we're not thinking about or we're not aware of at this time. So until we can get our traffic engineer involved and for them to say, hey, it's okay to do this for safety reasons, it may not just be right. It may not just be the speed or path of travel. It might be just changing it ever so slightly, may change the stopping sight distance in one area as opposed to another, or give less visibility for a pedestrian crossing. So there's a lot of things to consider.
Agreed, but Sandy and I have been bringing up bikes for the last almost 2 years, and every time you brought up roads, why are we not considering this when we're talking about repaving big things like Auburn Folsom? You say we have to plan ahead. Why didn't we plan ahead?
We need the plan. That's the
Okay.
thing.
Well,
That
why are
that
we
you
paving
get-
big roads without a plan?
Well,
Because there's people
So-
that bike on, I know it's not a bike lane. People bike on Auburn Folsom and then it's a big safety hazard for them. You say it's a safety hazard when we shrink down the lanes. It's already a safety hazard. So we need to be making sure we're planning ahead before we spend big amounts of money like this.
No, absolutely. And please keep in mind that when we do these roadway projects, staff is only going off of direction that we were given.
So maybe we should pause and get the plan going before we start paving a whole bunch of big roads. I'm a big fan of plan before spending a whole bunch of money that we have to then spend again. So my thought is let's get the plan going and maybe we pause the road paving until we figure out what we actually should be doing. So we don't have to do it twice. Food for thought.
I think that, there's many things to keep into consideration on that and certainly looking forward to the workings on the circulation element in our bike and pedestrian plan and moving those forward. But I would hate to just put a complete kibosh on our street maintenance because of that, but I feel much better that now we actually are going to be doing that. We've been talking about doing it, but now we have the ARPA money and we're dedicating to do it. So I think that at least we'll get some answers soon.
And if I may just say something, so the roadway work was done on Auburn Folsom Road, but if you've noticed, instead of going back with a thermoplasty, which would cost us to obliterate the roadway to actually put bike lanes in, we went with a paint. So it is easily removable so that we can add those bike lanes because staff is aware that those conversations are being had about adding bikeways there. It is paint now and not thermoplasty, which would do some damage to the road if we're taking it
Cost
off.
extra money to take
Yes.
that out when
Yeah.
that's,
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate that. Riddell Harris. All right, any other
Madam-
public?
Madam Mayor, could I ask one more question?
Yeah, I was gonna ask if there was any more public comment just because we were in that.
So this is a 5-year plan. I just spent a bunch of time trying to find a road from my old neighborhood and it's not in here. So when we post this up, make it available to the public, what should people do if they don't see their road in this 5-year plan? Are all the roads in the city in this 5-year plan? I guess that's the question.
No, so every road could never be covered within 5 years. The reality is every road in the city should be covered within 20 years. Every single road should see some sort of treatment within 20 years. So there are going to be some roads that within the first 10 years that may see a seal coat and a surface treatment within within that 10-year period because of need. But then there's some roads that are currently sitting at a PCI of 90 that may not require anything other than a slurry seal in 15 years, right? And there's some roads that are not on there that may require to go on there within 2 years. And that's what Street Saver allows us to do. As we see things along the way, we input it into the program and it updates the program as we go along and it allows us that flexibility.
So that was a clarification I wanted to make sure everybody understood because not every road is in here. And just because your road's not in here doesn't mean that we've forgotten about it.
No.
It'll eventually make it to the 5-year plan and it'll get dealt with in that 20-year horizon.
That is correct.
There are private roads though, too, that also wouldn't be in here, correct? We
Right.
would
So
roads
in
where-
theory, we wouldn't be doing any work on any
Yeah,
private road.
I just want
Yeah.
There may be a reason why it's not in here and it's not going to get covered in the.
Yeah,
transcript.
and if
Not everyone knows if their road is private or public.
and if you're uncertain, by all means, call Public Works and we'll tell you. We have documentation showing what roads are private and what are not.
Okay, great.
Yeah, on this discussion, it's really good. And that's where, and I was even trying to find it and I can't on our website and is making sure that it's not just this report, but connected to the PCI itself as well, because everybody should be able to find their road and see the condition of it. But then have the accompanying plan that shows what we're going to do in the next 5 years. But that explains why there are roads that aren't in the plan. Because I think that it's going to be a very common question.
Do we have the pavement or actually our Street Saver program report? Is that available as well? Because that really does tell people what their PCI is. And I think that is would be helpful for people to know that. Is that
Yeah,
available?
that's something we can certainly put out to the public. I'm a little apprehensive about that because we make so many changes to roadway surfaces throughout the course of the year. I would hate to have to update that and put it on the count every time we did crack sealing, or if we just went out and patched an area that required some dig outs of some sort.
But I mean, if council members wanted to know, or someone asked us and we could ask you.
Oh, absolutely.
So
It's encouraged.
If Mr. Spokely had a particular street that he was wondering about, he could.
Absolutely. And again, if someone doesn't see their road on this report, or when we put if council accepts this document and we put it public and they don't see it, by all means, call and ask, and we can explain either, yeah, your road is private or may not need work right now. It may not be what everyone wants to hear, but there's usually a reason for it.
I just thought of one more question, sorry. As in regards to our previous public comment talking about ADA access, you said that when we're doing the roads, we're looking at those curb cuts and other types of things that are there. There are some areas in Auburn where they're historical and we don't do curb cut. Am I correct that there's some historical areas of town where we're not able to, and then there's some that we are? Am I correct in that assumption?
There are some areas within Auburn currently that if we tried to make it ADA accessible, it would be cost prohibitive. You have to think about some of the curbs that are there. We have curbs that are sometimes this deep and are very steep. So can we put in a curb there? Yes. Can we make it 100% ADA accessible? Probably not, but we can certainly do something to bring it closer to compliance.
Okay.
Yeah, I think about my neighborhood in particular and how difficult that would be, which is Roby Point. And we don't have curbs or gutters we have gullies.
Yeah, well, no, I was thinking more of like Old Town, downtown area. I would imagine Old Town would have some serious problems in certain areas getting ADA compliance because of just the way it was built that many years ago.
The steep.
Okay.
And there are going to be projects that we're going to bring forward that's good over the next few years that council's going to see, that it's going to just address curb ramps, because there are going to be some areas where we're going to assume some cost because of the amount of travel that are there, or as the young lady mentioned earlier, just we know that people are utilizing it and we really have to put our efforts forward in those areas.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you. Good.
All right. Any other comments or questions on this item? Any further public comment? Okay, hearing none, I will bring this back to the council. And do I have a motion for action?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion by resolution to adopt the fiscal year 2022, 2023 through 2026, 2027 pavement management and maintenance report.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Spokely.
Yes.
Berlant.
Aye.
Riddell Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Dowden Calvillo.
Aye. Let the record show the motion has been adopted unanimously. Thank you very much, Menjo, and we look forward to seeing the report online. All right, the next item on the agenda would be City Manager Report. Mr. Donlevy.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, a couple of items. Next week, staff's going to be meeting and going over the entire capital improvement program. This year, we put together the semblance of a 5-year program. Really, what we're going to look to do is build upon that. Tonight, you heard about pavement. It's going to be data driven. The next step is going to be our sewer, and then storm drains, and then all of our facilities that all go into that. One of the things that we're going to do is really start building upon everything. As the council talks about the accessibility of information and transparency, that is what the CIP eventually is going to get to on various things. So next week, from the staff standpoint, we're going to start looking to expand on all of that. And as I mentioned, everything is being geared towards a data-driven system. Tonight, we're talking about the PCI index. The one thing that's really nice about that Street Saver program is that it builds upon itself. The 2013 plan went out, and what it was a snapshot in time. We got the PCI index, you sat there and you started working on it. What the Street Saver program does is that it's integrated. So you've got the PCI index, you've got the ability to go in and update the system. So what that does, as Vengel talks about, increasing the overall PCI, it takes the streets, the treatment that you do, and then what it does is it upgrades. The Street Saver allows for depreciation. And that depreciation can happen from a number of factors. You can even calculate stuff in like weather that tells you what happens there. So it's a multi-pronged deal that if you keep up the data that goes into it, it updates the system naturally. So, but anyway, going to work on that. Just as an update from the last council meeting, staff met with the folks regarding the Carnegie Library. Very motivated group. I will tell you that we're exchanging a lot of information, a lot of things that they have to do. They are a really, really good group. But I think, you know, a lot of the times people think, well, hey, let's get into this. And then all of a sudden you start getting into the reality of things, and all of a sudden it's like, well, wow, this is going to be a lot of work. It is going to be a lot of work, but they are a very good organization. They are wickedly organized on things. And I think what we'll do is we're going to work on putting the semblances of things. We've got the Western States Trail Museum group that's working. There comes a point where all those things called reality start diving in on things, but overall, very good meeting with them. Staff also met with the folks regarding the Canyons 100. They are working this up. The folks from Ironman really are targeting Auburn to bring us our third world event. Western States, Tevis, and the Canyons 100. What we're looking at right now is the idea that it would be go from the point-to-point races to the idea that it would be a course where they would start and finish. Some of the things that we are kicking around, we're going to talk with the downtown about this, is the idea that we would have that start-finish right there on High Street. Now, it would, if you recall, this year, it went up through Upper Lincoln Way, up Cherry, out through Roby. The idea is that it would start, the races would start there, 100-mile, 100K, 50K, 25K. All the races would finish there. The difference is that they would finish differently. They would go up Upper Lincoln Way, and we're looking at other routes. We would open up the downtown again on Upper Lincoln Way, but come down a different route where they would finish at the same start finish. So it's a very similar way that the UTMB race in Chamonix, France does something very similar to that. So we're exploring options. We're going to outreach to the business community on all this stuff, but they are adding a 100-mile race into this. So it's kind of dynamic and overly pretty positive. And that's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for our city manager? Okay. Next item on the agenda is city council reports. Mr. Dale Harris, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Sure. The Economic Development Commission has been working really hard. They got out their grants and it closed. We got 27 applications, which is probably the most that I've ever heard. I think that doing it all at one time and getting it out there and publicizing it versus it kind of being a rolling, trickling basis is going to work great for us. So at our next meeting, we're going to be reviewing applications where it could be a long meeting, might take more than one. We'll see. But yeah, so we're really excited because we've had a problem getting grants before, so getting grants out before. So we're excited about that. ARD is having their Harvest Festival on the 15th. So there's going to be a scarecrow competition and pumpkin competition like normal. So come on out for the Harvest Festival.
Stop by my booth.
Do you have a booth?
Yes, I will.
Good for you.
Woohoo!
Is the baby going to be there?
Of course, shameless plug. I bring him everywhere.
I know. Candy. Jackie's wants to know if you're going to have candy.
I'll have to talk to my adult campaign manager.
I feel like there will be a lot of candy and lots of
Yes.
people dressed up. I'm sure there's going to be a costume competition and things like normal. So it should be a good time. We've been meeting a lot. There's been lots of fun going on at the airport. Most of the stuff Jonathan's been keeping everyone up to date on. So that's going pretty well. And then great work going on with the economic recovery group for the school district. And I did want to bring up that they did request at the end of their presentation for us to do a resolution endorsing Measure E, just like was previously done for Placer's Measure G. And so I want to make sure that we take that under consideration and bring that back if that's something that we want to do. So I just wanted to make sure that we responded to their request at the end of their presentation. So that's it.
Mr. Berlant.
All right, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. A couple things. Councilmember Spokley, myself, and our police chief attended the monthly regional homeless response planning team. Lots of discussion on permanent supportive housing. These are various types of housing, which can include all the way down to what we know as single-family homes in neighborhoods. And so lots of discussions about trying to tailor their future build out of as they get funding, taking into consideration local notification, though it was made very clear that it's a confidential process. So on one hand, they said they're going to work with locals to notify them, but then on the other side, they said it's confidential. We can't tell you what that looks like. So it was confusing, but lots of discussion. We were both very vocal in that conversation about how that looked and helping build that. So that group continues to meet every month. And then last week, the Chamber of Commerce's Government Affairs and Economic Development Committee met and had a presentation from the county's new economic development director. And she had a lot of positive things to say about her workings with our local cities. I asked her pretty point blank to her the concern that many cities have about the county luring economic development on the borders of the cities. And she really committed to working with our economic director in Jonathan and being a good partner. So that was good. And she's new. She came from the city of Seaside, if I'm not mistaken. So very different than the county of Placer. Lots of interesting stats that they have. I think Cindy mentioned this at Medler's, but the county hit over $100 million in agricultural revenue this past year. They had a significant increase in filming in Placer County. If you didn't know, sections of the new Top Gun were actually filmed in Placer County as well. So filming in Placer County was up. But anyways, it was just a good discussion, and hopefully we'll get some updates from our own economic director on how those collaborations and she had a word for it. I don't know if Jonathan, you remember, but this word of collaboration and competition put together, and she was very attuned to that. She had a unique combo for that. But anyways, that's all I've got for this month.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Spokley.
Thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. The quick report I have, as Daniel mentioned, we did sit through that permanent supportive housing conversation, which was very interesting. The secrecy I'm a little concerned about, but we beat that one up pretty good at this meeting. The only other update I've got, we did have a SACOG transportation subcommittee meeting last week. The big takeaway there was the staff at SACOG is going to request to extend the MTPSCS update by 2 years. It will take a legislative action at the state level. So there's a couple of other COGs in the area in California that are doing the same thing. Questions that I've got are kind of centered around the cycle for our RENA numbers and how will this potentially impact it if we kick everything down the road 2 years. So I'll wait to get those responses back from staff, but that was the big item, the big takeaway.
Good. Thank you very much. Just a few things for me to report. With Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, we had interviews for the executive director, so we did do that, and we will be moving forward with a decision soon. The SHAC committee is in the process of revising its guidelines and its application for the historic tiles. And so we plan to bring that, those recommendations for revisions to the council at an upcoming meeting. We're just trying to fine tune those. Again, we're revising the criteria really to make them more clear. And then the application itself and also the fee, the committee will be asking to increase the fee because of the cost that Rucola is now charging. We did finally get the tiles that the council approved last year. I think it was last year. They finally were engraved. And so SHAC will be working with the various entities on the formal release of those or the celebration of the tiles, but they look great. So, and thanks to staff for pressure washing all the other tiles so that they're nice and pretty again. They get kind of, you know, gummy and so forth there in Central Square. So good news on that end. I think that it was already shared with my colleagues, but I didn't report it out. Initially, I was elected to serve as the second vice president for the Sacramento Valley Division on the League of Cities. That happened this summer, and so I was excited to serve in that capacity. But a couple weeks later, I received a call from our new president indicating that the division's representative to the League of Cities Board of Directors was not seeking re-election in her council seat and therefore was not eligible to serve as the division's representative on the board. And wouldn't you like to be that person? So after some discussion as to what would that involve, I did agree to serve and was unanimously elected by the Sacramento Valley Division. So I will be now sitting on the League of Cities Board of Directors. And I'm excited about that in part because it really enables us to bring some of our issues to a larger entity. And I'll talk more about that during my speech with the transition for the city council. So, but assuming that's right, because nothing is ever set in stone. Well, I've experienced that myself. So thank you. But I will have an opportunity to speak anyway, even if it's public comment, right? So in any event, I did want to announce that so I am looking forward to serving in that capacity. And the great news, there are several meetings that I'm required to participate in that are up and down the state. And as a board member, the league will pick up all of the costs for travel and accommodations. So the city of Auburn will not be responsible for any of those costs. So, but big things happening on that end and looking forward to serving. Other than that, that's all that I had for this evening. And unless I hear any objection, I will adjourn tonight's meeting. Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.